Good evening, everyone. This is the regular meeting of the DeKalb City Council, April 9, 2018. Prior to the start of our meeting this evening, I would ask that any members of our audience who would like to speak to any items on our agenda, or for that matter, any items perhaps not on our agenda, to fill out a speaker request form and give those to our city clerk, Sue Herman, who will give them to me, and I'm going to try to keep those in the order in which they are given to me, although we will follow the agenda. So if you wanted to make a comment on the roll call, which nobody has thus far this year, you'd be right at the top of the list. So with that, I'd ask our city clerk, Sue Herman, for a roll call, please.
Jacobson?
Here.
Fazekas?
Here.
Marquardt?
Here.
Fagan?
Here.
Noriko?
Here.
Burbach?
Here.
Favor?
Here.
Smith?
Here.
8 present.
I'd ask our officer on duty tonight, Police Officer Keith Erkey, if he'd please come forward and lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Keith?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Officer Erkey. Okay, we next have to approve our agenda. Are there any additions or deletions to the agenda? Alderman Fagan.
On consent agenda on F4, if we could put that on a separate issue, I've got a conflict of interest on that. I have to recuse myself. We put that in a separate item.
Okay, you want and what item is that?
That would be the resolution for the event for liquor license for Cornfest.
So that would be item number 4
On the consent agenda.
under the consent agenda. And you'd like that moved to a place on our regular agenda?
Yeah, just move it into the first so that we can,
Okay, so we would make that then under items for separate action, that will become number 1,
right.
okay? Everybody clear on that? Moving what was, it was Alderman Fagan's move to move item 4 under the consent agenda to item number 1, items for separate action. I need a motion to approve then that revised agenda.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanukin?
Yes.
Marquardt?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko? Yes. Burbach?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Prior to opening item number D tonight, public hearings, I'd like to comment on the fact that we have received a number of opinions that our public hearing, and in holding that this evening, we may not be adhering to certain postings regarding the holding of public hearings. I didn't say that very well grammatically, but I think you get the gist. I'm going to ask our city attorney, Dean Frieders, to review an email that he had sent me today after I responded to a number of constituents regarding the possibility that we weren't following the laws, if you will, regarding the posting prior to holding a public hearing. So Dean, could you address that, please?
Yes, Mayor. The specific question that was forwarded was whether the city was complying with the statutory requirements applicable under the Community Antenna Television System Statute, 65 ILCS 5/11-42-11. That statute has a number of subsections in it. Subsection A talks about circumstances where municipalities, in some circumstances, establish a new community access television system, a cable franchise. Subsection E of that same statute talks about where a municipality has existing cable franchises and offer an additional cable franchise. Subsection F talks about circumstances where a municipality establishes its own cable franchise and operates a franchise itself. Under subsection A, there's a certain set of notice requirements for giving notice to any existing franchisees, publishing a notice in the newspaper, and the statute contemplates publishing at least 14 days in advance of public hearing in 2 or more newspapers published in the county, city, village, and the third being conducting a public hearing. That is the section of the statute that applies to circumstances where a municipality seeks to own and operate a community antenna television system, acquire, construct, own, operate for the use or benefit of private consumers or users. It lays out those requirements. Subsection E, which talks specifically about the circumstances where a municipality has what the statute defines as an existing cable television franchise, in this case Comcast, and seeks to add an additional cable television franchise, in this case MetroNet or CMNRUS. In that circumstance, the municipality is required to give written notice to the incumbent, which has been done, conduct a public hearing, and determine based upon a list of enumerated factors whether the additional cable franchise should be granted. So there's a different statutory process for granting an initial franchise versus granting additional cable franchises, and the city has fully complied with all of the standards applicable to granting additional franchises. In addition, we have surveyed, there are approximately 10 other communities in Northern Illinois that have undertaken franchise agreements with MetroNet. The vast majority of them have not done any publication. Some of them have published in one newspaper. We have published a notice of public hearing in the Chronicle 14 days in advance, more than 14 days in advance of tonight's public hearing, out of an abundance of caution and to keep up with the standards established by other communities, even though it is not required. I should note that same approach is the approach being utilized by Sycamore as they move forward towards their public hearing, which will be occurring on, I want to say, April 16th. I believe it's 1 week from tonight. So again, we are meeting all the statutory requirements. We're in fact exceeding them with the notice that was provided, and we are following the highest level of transparency of the communities that are considering or have considered MetroNet franchises in the past 2 years.
Well, I appreciate you sending that back to me. I'm told that if we, this council, if you decide that there is too much of a legal question not to move forward with this, I would entertain a motion to remove the public hearing from this agenda. In so doing, if we were to have that motion, and if that were to pass, I'm told that the potential startup in terms of logistics of getting MetroNet service into the ground, perhaps literally and figuratively, or off the ground, may be impacted. But again, we follow laws. I fully intend to do everything that I can to make sure that we follow laws. Getting the opinion of our city attorney on this particular issue and seeing what he has stated leads me to believe that we in fact do have a legitimate public hearing scheduled. However, I would entertain any motion or comment at this time regarding the advisability, if you will, of moving forward.
And Mayor, I would note again, this is not a unilateral approach. This isn't something the city is undertaking and plowing new ground.
Okay.
The approach that the city is taking is the exact same approach, or in fact has more notice than other communities that have adopted these. Geneva, Batavia, St. Charles, Montgomery, Oswego, Plainfield, South Elgin, Yorkville, as I mentioned, Sycamore. We have followed the approaches taken by a number of communities and confirmed their approaches. We've discussed it with the franchisee. And again, the statute specifically provides a different approach to a public hearing when you're granting an additional cable franchisee, as the city is in this circumstance.
Dean, while you and I have argued over certain things, and you know that I don't always agree with you, that's why I came to you today. Is there consensus that we can move forward with the public hearing? Okay, we will do that then, and I'm going to ask our interim city manager, Patty Hoppenstedt, to address this item. Public hearing to consider the granting of a cable franchise agreement to CMN-RUS, Inc., doing business as MetroNet. Patty?
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, Council and members of the community. As discussed at a Committee of the Whole meeting, staff has worked to develop a cable television franchise agreement with what will refer the company as MetroNet. And MetroNet, again, just a refresher, utilizes 100% fiber optic network to provide high-speed internet, phone, and television service to homes and businesses. This state-of-the-art technology will help meet the demands of DeKalb residents, businesses, and become increasingly reliant on access to reliable, high-speed internet for many aspects of their daily lives. Staff has developed an agreement for review tonight by the City Council that mirrors the franchise agreement in place with the cable system provider currently doing business in the City of DeKalb, which has been identified, obviously, as Comcast. As Dean mentioned, under the law, the city's current terms of the city's current franchise agreement with Comcast, in following the law, we provided Comcast with a copy of the franchise agreement and allowed them to comment, which has been included in the agenda packet. So Comcast responded in writing to the notice which they received, and their government and regulatory affairs manager. We have been in communication and contact in ensuring that we follow that aspect of the law, as well as going, as Dean mentioned, the public notice that has gone out to the Chronicle and other publications. So in a public hearing, which is open to the public to provide feedback and commentary regarding the proposed franchise agreement, but prior to approving of MetroNet as an additional cable television franchise as contemplated by the law, the city must evaluate various factors. So the factors that the city has contemplated is the public need for such additional cable television franchise. And detail is provided in the materials in the agenda packet for that factor. The capacity of public rights of way to accommodate such additional community antenna television service. The potential disruption to existing users of public right-of-ways to be used by such additional franchise applicant to complete construction and to provide cable television services within the proposed franchise area. The long-term economic impact of such additional cable television system within the community. And obviously, any other factors as franchising authority shall deem appropriate, and the City Council may consider other relative information prior to making a decision. So the city has engaged in an extensive due diligence process on this matter, including significant research on franchise trends throughout the country, identification of projects to consider for inclusion within the agreement, and the experience that other communities have had with MetroNet, as Dean mentioned, in contacting the staff and the process they undertook and any obstacles and challenges and things that we, the City of DeKalb, need to consider, which again are outlined in the staff memorandum. So in order to get to the matter at hand and allow for public input on this matter, are there any questions the City Council has for me? Otherwise, we'll go ahead and entertain feedback from the community.
I would make a note of the fact that our public hearing did start at 6:20. Okay? And now I'd like to see if there's any members of the public who would like to speak to this item.
And I do have a representative from MetroNet here to answer any specific questions for MetroNet.
Okay. Mark? Please state your name.
Sure. Mark Sharat, 4th Ward. Quick question about this agreement. Is it going to be rolled out, and perhaps the representative can address this, in a certain part of the city first, or are those who live, let's say, on the south side of town going to get this service last? I mean, is there going to be preference for different parts of the city? On a point of order that you bring up about the public hearing also, if you don't feel this public hearing is in compliance, the mayor does have the option also to continue the public hearing to the next meeting, just so you know. You could always do that. So that's just the one question I want to have answered. Thank you.
Kathy?
Thank you, Mayor. Kathy Scheller with MetroNet. In answer to your question, and that's a legitimate question that we get in a lot of communities, what we do, and we actually design an entire city at one time. And typically, the areas that get lit up first are the ones that are closest to our feeder lines. So wherever those feeders are coming in, which is our big long haul coming in, typically those neighborhoods will be lit up first. But we literally are doing quite a ubiquitous build here in DeKalb, so you're not going to really notice any differential treatment of any particular area. In addition, I will follow up to let you know, which I spoke about at the last meeting, we have a very extensive construction communication tool whereby your residents will be able to go online and actually see where we are deploying fiber in real time.
Any other comments or questions from council regarding this? We've been provided background information. We had a presentation. Hearing none, I will close this public hearing at 6:29. Moving right along, item number E, special items or presentations and citizens' comments. Under Proudly DeKalb, we're going to recognize Greenacre Cleaners for their Suits for Success program. I know Human Relations Commission member is Norton Gilbert is here. Norton, would you like to say a few words about this, or do you want me to go ahead and do this solo? We can go ahead. Okay. I'm going to ask you to come forward to present the certificates. Suits for Success is a Northern Illinois program providing clothing to help recently released convicts secure jobs. Landing a job gives former prisoners an 80% chance of staying out of prison. Owner Tom Bartnett, Tom, please come up, and General Manager Eric Armstrong, I didn't see Eric here tonight, of Greenacre Cleaners have joined this effort. Greenacre collects, cleans, and donates suits to new parolees for job interviews upon their release from prison. And I'd like to commend the DeKalb Human Relations Commission, on which Norton Gilbert is a long-standing member. The commission has explored ways the city can help ease the reentry of ex-offenders into our local community. And so I commend Norton, our Human Relations Commission. So let me present this certificate of appreciation presented to Greenacre Cleaners for their participation in Suits for Success, a program that collects, cleans, and donates suits for ex-offenders to wear on job interviews. Therefore, with the appreciation and respect of the people of DeKalb, Illinois, this certificate is presented to Greenacre Cleaners. Norton, I'm going to have you present these to Tom, give one to Eric, and I'm going to shake your hand, Tom. Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'll try and keep this very brief. I don't know how many of you are aware of this program. It's been in the newspaper a couple times out here, and it's relatively new. It actually started at the end of 2016 when our trade association was approached by a religious group who had been approached by the Stateville prison. So since basically a year ago, the program has collected and distributed more than 12,000 garments to the different states primarily Stateville. Because we're one of the larger cleaners, we got involved. A lot of the smaller cleaners don't have the capacity to deal with this, but we've done 2,000 or 3,000 garments ourselves. And they come from you. You know, they come through your church, they come into our stores. There's a number of stores up in Rockford. A1 Cleaners is participating. And then we have the core business, our core business here in DeKalb. And so anything that you can contribute, give us a call. You know, we'll tell you where to drop it off. We can pick it up, and we'll keep this program rolling. Thanks for your help, thanks for your support, and thanks for your business.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Norton, for facilitating that. Our second item tonight is the commendation of NIU Staff Meteorologist Gilbert Sabensky. And I know Police Commander Jason Leverton of our police department would like to say a few words. Jason.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure and honor to represent not only the police department, but also the fire department and public works department and the city administration as a whole in recommending a commendation for NIU Staff Meteorologist Gilbert Sabensky. Gilbert began his career at Northern Illinois University nearly 20 years ago on October 1st, 1998. While it's difficult to sum up a 20-year career in just 2 or 3 minutes, I'll do my best to summarize a few highlights. Gilbert was instrumental in building a robust weather forecasting system for all of the NIU campuses and the surrounding area. Anyone who knows Gilbert, even just a little bit, knows that Gilbert is very passionate about weather safety and emergency preparedness. Throughout his career, Gilbert was responsible for a number of safety enhancements on campus. Through his work, NIU became the first university in the country to be designated a storm-ready university by the National Weather Service. Let me just repeat that for a moment. Through Gilbert's work, his determination and persistence, NIU became the first storm-ready university in the country. That occurred 10 years ago. Across the country, there are now 228 universities and colleges that are storm-ready certified. So it's safe to say that Gilbert started a very important national trend that began right here in DeKalb. It's also why he has earned the moniker of Gilbert Storm Ready Sabensky. In addition, Gilbert routinely conferred with the administrative staff of the city's police, fire, and public works departments, advising of impending weather conditions and its impact on each department. He was always willing to take a phone call or provide weather information at a moment's notice. His weather forecasts, which were always detailed, and often included a bit of humor, were always welcomed. He also helped implement an enhanced weather radar service in the police dispatch center. Gilbert regularly coordinated training events not only for city employees, but also for the general public by orchestrating weather spotter training in conjunction with the National Weather Service. Gilbert was instrumental in the city also obtaining weather-ready status by the National Weather Service, as well as promoting the city as a weather-ready nation ambassador. Gilbert was always accessible to city staff during events such as 4th of July fireworks, Cornfest, and Homecoming to advise about weather conditions and any related hazards. None of these services to the city were an expectation of NIU nor the city, and Gilbert never received a dime in compensation for the city for his consultation regarding weather events. Gilbert did all of this for the city and for the residents of the city because of the level of professionalism, pride, and service he exhibited in the performance of his duties. Gilbert's service at NIU concluded today, April 9th, 2018. This is a rather ironic date, by the way, because it's exactly 3 years ago today that the Fairdale tornado occurred, of which Gilbert forecasted and witnessed in person. Through his work and through that event, it is Gilbert's hopes that everyone will remain alert to weather conditions and always be storm ready. In conclusion, I am pleased to represent all of us and recommending the commendation that the mayor will now present.
Yes, if you would come up, Jason and Gilbert, to come on up to the front, turn around, let the audience see you, and I'll read this certificate of commendation. And the nice thing is that Gilbert has guaranteed that winter is over. Is that? You haven't, you told me earlier today, Gilbert.
It'll be over about August.
Okay. This commendation is presented to Gilbert Sabensky upon his retirement as staff meteorologist at Northern Illinois University for his dedication to service to the community for the past 20 years. His commitment to assisting the fire, police, and public works departments of the city with daily weather forecasts, training, and emergency preparedness efforts have made DeKalb a better and a safer place to live and work. Therefore, the appreciation and respect to the people of DeKalb, Illinois, this certificate is presented to Gilbert Sabensky. I've signed that, Jerry Smith, Mayor, on behalf of the City of DeKalb, April 9, 2018, and I think it would be only proper that Jason present that to Gilbert.
Jason, thank you. Thank you.
Enjoy your retirement.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job.
Thank you for this.
I will. Thank you.
As Gilbert concludes his plaudits there along the side table, I'd like to move along to item number C. We have a proclamation, National Public Safety Telecommunications Week. I, Jerry Smith, Mayor of the City of DeKalb, declare the week of April 8 through 14, 2018, to be National Public Safety Telecommunicators Week in honor of the men and women whose diligence and professionalism keep our city and citizens safe. It's quite a lengthy proclamation. I think that catches the gist. I'm going to ask one of our telecommunicator, Hillary Fowler, to come forward and receive this proclamation. Congratulations. Thanks again.
Thank you. Thank you for all your hard work. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And we also, as Hillary makes her way down the row, I'd like to ask our Public Works Director, Tim Holdeman, to come forward to receive a proclamation, Earth Day, April 22, 2018. I, Jerry Smith, Mayor of the City of DeKalb, have the distinct honor of proclaiming April 22 as Earth Day throughout DeKalb, and encourage all of our inhabitants, our businesses, and institutions to use Earth Day to celebrate the Earth and promote the well-being of the inhabitants of DeKalb and the protection of its environment. Our Public Works Director, Tim Holdeman, is also the staff liaison to our Environmental Commission, which continues to do marvelous work on our behalf in the city of DeKalb. So, Tim, I'm going to present the certificate of you for celebration of Earth Day.
Thank you, Mayor.
Moving right along, under item E, Glidden North Revitalization Plan Task Force update. As you know, our second ward Alderman Bill Finucane and our first ward Alderman Dave Jacobson are council liaisons to our AGN North revitalization efforts, and I'm going to ask one or the other of you to give us a short update.
All right, well, the various subcommittees of the task force have continued to meet since over the last 2 weeks. I would like to report that the Glidden North community meeting will be held next Monday, 4/16 at 6:30 p.m. at Westminster Church on Glidden Road, and invite everybody from the community to come out and attend.
Okay. Dave, you have anything on AGN? Okay. We have one presentation tonight, and that's a Fire Stop program video. I'm going to ask our Fire Chief, Eric Hicks, to speak to this item. Eric?
Good evening, Mayor, Council, residents, and staff. Tonight, I'm going to talk about what I consider a groundbreaking presentation in fire protection. This product has been recently installed in all apartments at University Village as part of the 2015 development agreement. A little history about the product. In 2017, last year, we responded to 36 cooking fires in the city, which caused an estimated $215,000 in damage just from cooking fires. Tragically, last year, we also experienced one fire death from a cooking fire, just like the one I'm going to show you here in a couple minutes. I'm going to talk about a product called Fire Stop, and that's mandated in every apartment in University Village, and also the Housing Authority has put them in all theirs also. So if I can get Brian to roll this short video here. Byron, thank you. These cost between $30 and $60 to install. So there's two types, and we'll see both. This is the basic model that you're seeing right here. It's easy to install. It goes right up under your kitchen hood. Sticks on with magnets. It's kind of like a restaurant Ansel system, but at a very low cost. So that's the basic model, putting out a grease fire. The next is going to be the more advanced model, which is a little higher cost. So this is the more advanced model. So the next step is we had a fire 2 weeks ago in an apartment that was newly rehabbed, cooking fire just like this. Video I shot, so.
This video includes a kitchen that recently had a fire on the stove that was put out by a recently installed fire stop. This fire stop discharged, putting the fire out without causing major damage to the kitchen.
So that's it for the video, but you can see that's pretty much the exact same fire that you've seen in the demonstration early on. So it's a video that was shot last week, 2 weeks ago, just in DeKalb. So, like I say, I just wanted to make you aware that the codes that you guys do enact do work. This is a piece of equipment that's very cost effective that I would recommend in any home in town. So, thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Appreciate it. Any comments? Yes, Alderman Origo.
Question, is this something that if I went to Lowe's or something I could buy, or?
I'm not sure if Lowe's carries them, but you can find them online anywhere. They're, like I say, easy to install, and an array of different places sell them.
That is no reflection on my cooking.
Okay, thanks,
Eric. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, moving right along, item number 3, approval of the mayor's appointments. I have no appointments tonight. I would like to say that in June, we're going to have quite a few folks perhaps rotating off of some of our boards and commissions, and I would ask those watching at home and any of those of you in the audience who may be interested in serving your community through one of our 14 boards and commissions to please see me. I can give you an idea of what we might have available in terms of openings, and if any of those fill or fit sort of a passion on your interest, I'd love to consider you for service on one of our boards and commissions. Moving right along now to public participation. And I can see from the speaker request forms that we do have a number of folks who would like to speak to a specific item. So I'd like to make a few comments, if I may, to council and to the public. A year ago, I had just won an election, one during which I said that public safety had to be near the top of our priorities. 3 days ago, I had a call from Mark Thompson at Lord Stanley's saying that his building had been condemned and his business was going to be shut down. I quickly checked with our staff, who confirmed that serious structural issues were found in that building. While I may have concluded that the action of our staff was not very business-friendly, I wrestled with an image of a floor giving away, with resulting injury to some of our residents. I was especially sensitive to this situation after learning that upstairs tenants may suffer from this action. After weighing everything, I concluded that the action by our chief building official, our fire department, and our city attorney was justified. And in making that decision, I was putting public safety above all else. Let me make myself perfectly clear. I take full responsibility in accepting this city's decision on Friday. Did I know that businesses, most notably the bar and the Common Grounds coffee shop, would suffer? I certainly did. Was it clear that we would be negatively impacting individual apartment tenants? Yes. Now, after hearing what has occurred since Friday afternoon and realizing that we could probably have handled a few things differently, I remain steadfast in my belief that we tried to do the right thing. We're certainly cognizant of the way this blew up on social media. I'm disappointed at the misinformation that was out there, but it is what it is. The contentious nature of some comments directed at me, directed at this city, directed at this city council is disconcerting and frankly not very productive. I'd like to have a face-to-face chat with anyone who has a criticism or a compliment on what we're trying to do to re-energize our community. I'd only ask for some civility. I'll even sit down over one of those Lord Stanley specials. You know, a pizza and 2 pitchers of beer for $20. Hang in there, friends. Together, we can move this city forward. Having said that, we do have public participation. This item not on the agenda, and that's where we speak to these items. Our first speaker is Howard Solomon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for your comments that hopefully have cleared up a number of things that I was particularly upset about when I first heard about the Common Grounds being out of business on Saturday morning. I am a resident of this city and have been a patron of Common Grounds since it opened. And I just found that the notion that nobody at that in the address area between 142 and 150 Lincoln Highway knew that any of this was coming is a way to not do business. It's a way to put people out on the street. And taking it as a way to put people out on the street, I look at this as a situation where I know that the rent in those little apartments up above Lord Stanley's is not very much. It's a place where the poor go, or those who are barely getting by. I'm a homeowner. I'm lucky I'm a homeowner. I've had a place that I could come back to day after day. They don't. They didn't. And to be told on a Friday, you have to be out by 10 o'clock on Monday morning is unconscionable. It is just not the way that I want my city to act. And the city that I live in, I'm proud to be a part of the city of DeKalb until this event, by and large, much of my pride was based on thinking that this city had a conscience. And the way this was handled, without giving people notice, without providing people with alternatives, without actually completing an engineering study saying that there actually were safety hazards, is the way that I would not want a city to act. It's a way that a city that is bullying its citizens is going to act. It's the way that some of the sections of Chicago that I've seen where we've had gentrification and had to move the poor out in order to be able to upscale has acted an awful lot of the time. I don't want to become that. I'm proud to be here doing things the old-fashioned way. Thank you.
Thank you, Howard. Our next person who'd like to speak to this issue is Bessie Chronopoulos. Bessie, our former mayor.
Oops. I'll need another walker if I keep on tripping like this. A couple of items before I get to this issue. When you all get to item F4, you may want to explain why there are two different items on one resolution. We had talked about that at some point in time. I can't seem to wrap my head around that, why there are two items under one resolution. It doesn't seem right. Something doesn't sit right, because I've been preoccupied with this issue, so I didn't have time to really delve into that. Another item that is kind of related to this is, and as the mayor pointed out before, you wanted to get more people to come to your various boards and commissions to serve, which I think is phenomenal. That's a great thing. It would help, and I've been begging for this for years now, it would help if our website, such as it is, would list all of the members of each of the boards and commissions and trustees, so that the public would kind of know who is on there, and they could maybe even email them or contact them with a particular issue. Something came up over the weekend, and I would love to have been able to get right to the Environmental Commission. I know Dan Kenny, and I just happen to be more in tune than the average person, but that's got to change. Goodness gracious me. If we can't get in touch with our people on the boards and commissions, how can there be public interaction and input? So hopefully we can make that a priority. Howard, you said it pretty much as well as anybody could say. When I first found out about this on Friday, I believe it was, I just could not believe what was happening. Let me make it clear. I am not against code enforcement, not by any stretch of the imagination. If anything, we have not been consistent in that for years. We know that. And that does need to change, and we do need to be consistent and fair throughout the entire city, because, Mayor, you're right, safety first. No question about that. But what's missing here is common sense and compassion. How the missing of the common sense and compassion can lead to condemnation, I cannot wrap my head around that at all. I think we know that some specific structures in downtown have had issues. But what in the world, why in the world did the tenants and the poor commons grounds person have to suffer for that? Why? Why does his business have to stop and his income have to cease because of the way this was handled? Absolutely no reason why his doors had to be closed. Nothing. There's nothing wrong with his particular structure and facility there. Had there been a problem, why did it just pop up all of a sudden, and you're talking about a couple of days worth of time before everybody's just shoved out the door? Something is just not right here. It just does not sit well the way this happened. So total lack of common sense and total lack of compassion. And even in today's Chronicle, I was just reading the paper, they said, I think Mr. Frieders had said that there were some, what do they call those, propane tanks in the hallways. Now, that's something that any inspector could say, get those out of here right now. Common sense, just read through the article.
We're well over 3 minutes now, Bessie, could you wrap it up?
Yeah, I tell you.
Okay, thank you.
Come on, some compassion here.
Thank you. I've asked Dean Frieders, our city attorney, and our city manager, Patty Hoppenstedt, to give an update on where we are as of 7 o'clock on Monday night with this whole issue. But I think we're going to go ahead and hear public comments regarding this issue, and then I'm going to let Dean and Patty say something. Is that okay? Lynn, did you want to speak to this particular item? Yes. Lynne Fazekas.
Lynne Fazekas, 4th Ward. Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Hi.
I too would like to speak to the whole Lord Stanley's issue. One of the things that I've noticed and that I have talked about as well as written about before has been the procedurally, and the saying is, it's not what you're doing, it's how you're doing it. That counts for a whole lot, and it definitely feeds into the trust issues. I have noticed that ever since 2014, this 48-hour eviction has been used several times, and I've never been able to get information about these things to my satisfaction. And I have no other conclusion that I can make besides the fact that people have been told to leave and they left. Well, okay, so I have a house on the south side, and if somebody tried to evict me, they'd have a pretty big fight on their hands. But I will, in looking back, say about 35 years ago or so, this did happen to me, and I ended up being homeless for nearly 5 months. So, and I do hope that even if that had not happened to me, that I would still be up here. I can't guarantee that, but I feel very, very strongly that there needs to be a higher standard for something like that. There needs to be more oversight, and there needs to be more support, because the people getting booted out of their homes, out of their apartments in this town, are people who have the least amount of resources, and they're not pawns in the big game of recreating Naperville or whatever it is that the staff have in mind. So anyway, I dearly hope that that will be looked at and the procedures followed and more oversight, and maybe a few more people need to get involved in this before making such a decision. I know for a fact that these evictions have created homelessness in this community, and I am not proud of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. As I had indicated, I met with Attorney Frieders and Joellen Charlton, our Community Development Director, and Patty Hoppenstedt, our City Manager, today. And we knew that we were going to get some comment tonight, and I do want to hear their remarks, as I think you will too, as an update. But one thing I suggested, at the danger of getting my city council members to revolt, and that is to have another committee of the whole dedicated to one subject, maybe what we need to do is dedicate an entire committee of the whole to ordinance violations, to condemnation proceedings, to that whole ballywick of what we're talking about tonight. So if you feel that might be a good idea, let me know.
I'll second that, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Third, okay. Mark Sharat, would you like to speak to this item?
Yeah, I got some time from the last meeting, remember?
Yeah.
I won't use it all, I promise. We've been flabbergasted twice now within the last 3 weeks. I want to bring up a subject real quick from the special meeting that was held in reference to approving the police radios, and the fact that I'm glad the council did admit to making a mistake. I appreciate hearing that. Even our acting city manager did. What I did not hear was part of our city attorney taking any blame for that. Everybody used the phrase we. I didn't hear that from the city attorney, whose job it is, I would assume, to understand the code of the state of Illinois. I don't think we're getting proper services from our city attorney. In fact, perhaps in your report a little later on, Dean, you could explain why at the special meeting when it took place and you intervened with the mayor for a special conference to talk about the Open Meetings Act and then suggest the council adjourn, you indicated that the meeting could take place, but not a vote on any sort of action take place. However, your opinion at the last city council meeting, when you explained your position at the special meeting that was held last week, you said the meeting could not take place at all. Which is it? Did the law suddenly change over the week? So I would like some sound legal advice. We're paying a lot of money for a city attorney. We need that advice. All right. Now, flabbergast number 2 here. I'm absolutely upset that this council and staff that you have working for you, Mayor, well, not the council per se, but staff, treated some citizens of our community absolutely reprehensible. It's absolutely reprehensible as far as the Lord Stanley situation. The city handled the condemnation of Lord Stanley's property. It's a textbook example of what not to do. This city showed no compassion for the residents who arrived home to see a posted notice telling them they had to get out by Monday morning at 10 a.m. I don't even believe there was a phone number for people to contact. You did this on a Friday evening when city offices are closed. The timing of this is very suspect. Now, I'll agree, there were code violations. I'm not saying there weren't. But there's no phone number for these residents to contact, leaving residents with questions. Mayor Smith, I got to ask you, were you there downtown Friday and over the weekend to contact your constituents affected and to assist them in answering their questions? Alderman Marquardt, is this not your area? Don't you represent Lord Stanley's? Isn't that in your ward? Were you down there at all? I didn't hear about you being down there. One thing that was nice was First Ward was represented in your ward answering some questions from people over the weekend. You totally disrespected your constituents. I find this absolutely ridiculous. You let your constituents down, Mayor and Mr. Marquardt. As a resident who lives above Lord Stanley posted online over the weekend, they said, quote, "They don't care about us," referring to the city of DeKalb. They've said nothing to us. 3 days, pretty much be out. How would you like to come home to that, see something like that on your door? Now, it wasn't until Sunday, from what I gather, after conversations on social media heated up to an inferno, that Ellen Charlton attempted to contact the affected residents and let them know what was going on and to inform them that they would not be kicked out after all. City staff is also responsible for this failure. Why did you make people wait day after day to find out that they wouldn't have to move out? Could you fall asleep knowing that someone was going to kick you out of your house? You saw this little notice in your house?
You're well over 3 minutes, Mark.
I have time from the last, remember?
No, well, you're at 3 minutes and 59 seconds.
Okay,
So.
I'll wrap it up in 60 seconds here. How many people do you think panicked because they did not receive accurate information? I agree. A committee of the whole meeting needs to be held to discuss these failures. This is truly a failure to proportions I've never seen before. Do something about it.
I don't usually respond to our comments because I am a firm believer that everybody should speak their mind. But I talked about civility. And Mark, I am personally affronted at some of your comments. Kay Shelton. Did you want to speak to this item, Kay?
I don't know what I'm going to say until I get up here. So I'm going to follow with something positive. July 10th, mark it on your calendar, be home. I don't know what time yet, but July 10th on PBS out of Chicago, you will see a program, 10 That Changed America, and it will feature some very familiar territory, Malta, DeKalb, and Rochelle. And as far as the tenants and everything else that happened, this is not the first issue, and some of this affects my day job. You've got some other plans in place that I don't know if they fell into place over the weekend or not, but perhaps think of this as what you would do if there was a fire rather than a code enforcement thing. What do? Do you call the Red Cross? Do you call charities? What do you do? Because this isn't going to be the last one. There have been 3 that I know of since September where multiple people have been displaced because of code enforcement. So think about, pretend it's a fire. What do? You don't do nothing. You help people. Think of it like that. Think of it as a natural disaster. Think of it as a tornado. You plan ahead for those, right? Do something else. Thanks.
Thank you, Kate. I hope I have the pronunciation correctly here. Is it William Astle?
Thank you. That's actually correct. Most people don't.
Astle, yeah. William Astle, please.
Thank you. Nice meeting you for the first time. I'm a resident, 1 year, going on 2. Recent to the area because my fiance is now at the NIU.
Good.
But we come from Tacoma, Washington. Tacoma has been hit very heavily by gentrification. And something like Lord Stanley's issue, how we found somewhere, immediately the first time we got here, the first day, we had a place to meet with her fellow graduate students. The issue that arises is that the code enforcement, as someone who's worked as a contractor, as someone who's worked in the construction business, who's looked into code enforcement to other businesses and people, property owners, to meet that standard, the way this was carried out was irresponsible. I find it personally reprehensible. I've seen it before. I've seen it cut out families from their homes. On top of that, you have a part of a town's culture. You are more than responsible for just the works, the way that the city operates, but also the culture that surrounds the town. We were happy to see something like that so cohesively. But what I wonder, many of the times, are the same businesses, are the same large developers, are a lot of the same terms applied to them. What I ask is that if you were to impose this kind of code, if you're going to impose this kind of registration act on them, I ask you just simply impose the same on them. I know I might not have all the information. I'm only here for one and a half year. But it still stands that they should be held to the same standard. And from my understanding, from what has been said around town, from what has been said around college students, that is not true. So please, just hold someone to the same standard, or at least try to hold that same compassion. Thank you.
Thank you, William. And it's great to have you in DeKalb. So, Jeff Holgren.
Thank you, Mayor. I was going to talk about this when I came up to talk about the parking issue, but since we're talking about it as a separate issue, I thought I'd talk about it now.
Sure.
I wanted to, obviously, I was on the Zoning Board of Appeals. I'm Jeff Holgren. I've been here my whole life. I was on the Zoning Board of Appeals for 10 years, so I'm pretty familiar with code, and I understand the issues related to code. And most of us don't understand, most of us in this room are not privy to the facts regarding coming in and looking at Stanley's and finding out some of the violations. But as far as I'm concerned, this is judge and jury at the same moment. I mean, you walk in, you say, unless these things are so critical that the place is going to fall down, it doesn't seem to me that the correct kind of respect was given to Mark and the owner, and in regard to the sequence of events, and to the residents as well. So, to me, I realize, and a lot of people have spoken to the residents issue, I'm speaking to the business aspect of it. Stanley's has been here forever, and before that it was the Shamrock. It's been around for 50 years. It represents a very, very key part of a certain part of this community. There's old and young meeting in there. It's for the 30-year-olds in town, for people that decided to stay in DeKalb. It represents a very big part of their culture. I mean, my son lived in DeKalb until last year. He's 30 years old. When he comes back, everybody gets together. 25 people get together at Stanley's. It represents a cultural aspect of this town, and I think it deserved a lot more respect when being dealt with in this manner. The other thing is the optics are terrible. They're disgusting. I mean, for the city, I feel that we should have followed a sequence of events that was much more generous and much more compassionate to the people that lived above there and to the people that used Stanley's as a cultural center. And I know that it's got some issues related to the physical aspect of it. The bathrooms are dumps. I mean, going to Stanley's, very few people like Stanley's. Even the people that go there don't like Stanley's bathrooms. So the point is, I realize that it's not O'Leary's, it's not Eduardo's, it's not certainly not Elwood. I mean, this is not a stunningly beautiful place. That's why people like it. I mean, they like it for that. Dress it up in the front, keep it the way it is, make it do something to be better. I mean, make it obviously follow code, but the optics of this are terrible. They don't look good, and I think that they're very disrespectful to a certain group of people in town, and also obviously to the residents there. So I think we can do things better, and I think proceeding forward, we should work with Mark to try to get this place back up and running. And I know I talked to you today, Mayor, and I know that it's on your mind to get this thing back in operation, and I feel that the rest of the council shares this thought, that we should get this is an institution in DeKalb. The Stanley's is maybe an ugly institution for some people, but it's a wonderful institution for our young people. And God bless them. I want them to stay in town, and I want them to feel comfortable with DeKalb. I don't want them to feel like they're being pushed out. And this certainly looks like they're being pushed out. So I really feel like we can do better.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay, we've gone through all of the speaker request forms of those who wanted to speak to this issue. I'm going to call upon our Community Development Director, Joellen Charlton, who has a chronology of what has happened with the Lord Stanley's case, from the city's perspective. And I would hope that after Joellen, I'm going to ask Dean Frieders to speak to this, and also Patty Hoppes. So, Joellen?
Thank you, Mayor and Council and members of the community as well. I really do appreciate all of the comments we've heard tonight. I do take your suggestions seriously. We are in a learning process of doing various things in the community, so we do like to incorporate those recommendations into things as we move forward. So I do have really good notes. I do want to use this opportunity to go through the chronology of the events that happened, because I believe that through the course of all of the communication online and various other external communications that have happened, there was a lack of real information that was occurring. And we did have a lot of communication with owners of the properties, and we're moving forward. So I'm going to take a few minutes to go through. I'm going to tag team with our chief building official, Thaddeus Mack, who is also going to provide us with some pictures to show exactly what we were looking at when we made the determination that we felt we need to take in order to preserve safety in that building. And I think it's important to get the full story, so that's what we've been asked to provide to you this afternoon. So last Thursday, this began as part of the staff's carrying out of our routine responsibilities to complete fire life safety inspections in restaurant establishments. This action is authorized by city code, and 2 members of my staff began the inspection of the Lord Stanley's, the annex, and the common grounds property at that time. Over the weekend, and continuing through even today, the city did receive, not the city, actually, a lot of conversation and communication, and elected officials were receiving a significant amount of communication happening in emails and blogs and various other social media. So as I mentioned before, in response, both Thad and I will tag team and provide some factual overview of the chronology, as well as some detailed information and description of the conditions that we observed and documented last Friday that we believe warranted the actions that were taken, and also where we are today after having worked with the owners to make the corrections that were being requested. Process is proceeding as it should. Over the weekend, owners did start making improvements to the property. The process continued today extensively, and I'll go through exactly what those communications were. We had calls, we had on-site meetings, remediation is being undertaken, and we are having conversations with the owners about how soon the condemnations can be lifted, assuming that we get some temporary measures in and going while some of the longer-term fixes are happening. So let me run through some of the chronology a little bit more specifically. Thursday, April 5th at 3 p.m. was when our 2 officers, Fire Prevention Officer Lynch and Chief Building Official Thaddeus Mack, went to Lord Stanley's to conduct the fire life safety inspection. Those inspections are performed and can be performed without notice. So I know that was something that came up. Typically, we can provide notice, but typically we found in the past that providing notice and giving them an opportunity to fix things up before you get there doesn't really reflect what happens the other 364 days out of the year. Sometimes it does, but sometimes it doesn't. So that inspection was scheduled interior to the department, and we went out and performed that at 3 o'clock on Thursday. The inspection included the Lord Stanley's and a portion of the basement of the annex. It did not extend into the basement of the Lord Stanley's or the basement under common grounds. The inspection was halted shortly before 5 o'clock. We spent nearly 2 hours in the building, and the chief building official and fire prevention officer did speak with Lord Stanley employees to set up a scheduled re-inspection the next day at 10 a.m. So that's another part of the ordinance, is that we can do follow-up or scheduled inspections. So working with the employee that was there, we made arrangements to come during off-business hours. On Friday, April 6th at 10 a.m., the fire prevention officer and chief building official did return to Lord Stanley's, and the employees of the establishment were there to unlock the doors and let them in for the inspection. The inspection of Lord Stanley's revealed extent of significant property maintenance concerns in the Lord Stanley's basement, with large areas of organic growth, including areas where food was stored. There were unsanitary conditions and areas with floor tiles that we believed could have contained asbestos and other property maintenance violations. Further inspection of the annex property showed a number of more severe conditions that jeopardized the structural integrity of the property and what we believed posed an immediate hazard to the first floor occupants. Inspection of the common hallways for the second floor residential showed a number of propane cylinders, which was mentioned by one of the residents, being stored indoors. And in fact, the people on site at the time did remove those outside at that point, as well as a complete absence of fire extinguishers. These are very minor things that can be pretty easily acquired by the owner and put in the building. So while the notices did include language that condemnation could be occurring on Monday, we didn't really expect that to happen because these are things that the owner was informed of and that we believed would be easily fixable. The inspections that day continued all morning and into the early afternoon. The fire prevention officer and the chief building official returned to City Hall to review codes, talk with the mayor, go speak with our attorneys, and determine how we were going to address issues in the building. At 2:25 p.m., and again, I'm going to go through this chronology because I think it's important to know how much communication we had with the owners of these properties, because I think there was some misinformation happening, like they didn't know, we weren't talking, so I want to provide that information. So at 2:25, the fire prevention officer called Mark Thompson, who is the owner of Lord Stanley's, which is the west part of the building, regarding the concerns of the property, both in the residential and the commercial areas, and the fire prevention officer explained that the property would be condemned pending remediation. So that was the first communication. Also at 2:25, our city attorney called the attorney for Mark Thompson and advised him of the concerns as well. At 2:30, the fire prevention officers returned to the property while the chief building official works on drafting written notices to the property owners. They went back out, the commercial areas were posted. The fire prevention officer at that point spoke to Thompson's brother, who was at the property, and explained the concerns that we had for the residential areas. At that point was the time that the brother removed the propane cylinders and discussed the timeline to install smoke detectors and the fire extinguishers. Based on the timeline for repair and the desire to avoid impacting the tenants, we did not decide to do any immediate removal of those residents. Again, we thought that would be something easily attainable by Monday. The residential doors were posted with the notice indicating that condemnation would be completed or contemplated for the following Monday. The fire prevention officer also spoke with the manager from the world-famous pizza as well as Lord Stanley's. So now we're at 4 o'clock. The tenant in common grounds provides access to the basement. So one of the other ways we can provide or gain access to a property is if someone shows us. So in going through the basements of both buildings on both sides, we kind of felt like there was something we were missing. So in working with that owner, we were provided with access to the building. At 4:50, the chief building official called Bill Vallis, who's the owner of the building containing the annex and common grounds, and explained concerns to him that enumerated and identified all the issues. At 5:32, the chief building official has a second phone call with Mr. Vallis regarding building issues. At 5:54, our economic development planner, Jason Mishnick, reached out or had a conversation with the owner of Common Grounds, who now was involved and had a lot of concerns. At 6:10, the chief building official was able to have a conversation with Mr. Thompson regarding the emergency repairs and the efforts that needed to be undertaken. So he had that information that night. Fast forward through the weekend, Saturday, I'm sure that some of the owners were making some improvements. On Sunday, I heard from one of our elected officials that there were some concerns being discussed throughout the community about the residents and the plight that they were having and the concerns that they felt they needed to be out. So again, understanding that we didn't feel like there was going to be an issue trying to resolve the issues that were there. We didn't have concerns that they were going to in fact have to be out. So at that point, we thought it was very important to communicate with those residents that what the status was, what needed to be done, and that there was a very likelihood that they wouldn't need to be out. So we prepared a notice to physically paste or take to each resident's unit in those buildings. There was 8 of them. And our fire chief, Hicks, physically delivered them to 7 of the 8 units with information that one of the owners would distribute the last one to the last owner personally. So today, again, continuing this process, at 8:30, our chief building official had a phone call with Mr. Vallis regarding building conditions and potential emergency repair. So this gets into the, okay, now what do we need to do to lift the condemnation and figure out steps moving forward. At 11:15, a chief building official met with Mr. Thompson, who's now back in town, at Lord Stanley's to review temporary repair and remediation work to be performed, or that he performed there over the weekend. At that point, the official notice outlining every detail of the code that had been violated, which is required by code, we need to provide that to the owners, was hand-delivered to him at that point. At 12:21, the chief building official has a second phone conversation of the day with Mr. Valos regarding the building conditions and repairs. At 1:30, the chief building official meets at the annex in the common grounds with Valos and Valos' structural engineer. So again, I'm going to talk about that in a second. The chief building official isn't required to be a structural engineer. The city doesn't need to prove that something is structurally not capable. He's bound with interpreting the code, identifying non-compliant code issues, and then it's the owner's responsibility to provide any necessary work to show that it is structurally sound. The notice letter, again, at that point, outlining all of the code deficiency for that property owner was hand-delivered at that time. And at 2 p.m., the chief building official re-inspects the common hallways and the residential portions of the second floor above the annex and confirms that the condemnation is not required. So this process has continued since yesterday, all through today, all with the intent of trying to work with these landlords, improve the safety of the building. We've had extensive communication from the beginning to help these owners know what's necessary and come through the steps. I believe, and I think Thad will attest to this when he goes through some of his information, that relationship has continued to grow, and there's some of that mutual respect is starting to occur. So we believe that the anticipated timeline for remediation of the structural concerns at the annex and common grounds, that's going to be pursuant to that meeting with that structural engineer. So the city will be waiting for that plan from the structural engineer. The anticipated timeline for lifting the condemnation of Lawrence Stanley's and World Famous Pizza, again, based on the work that the owner took upon himself to complete over the weekend to make necessary repairs, we believe that could be lifted as soon as tomorrow, April 10th. Two other quick things before I turn it over to our chief building official, Thaddeus Mack. And again, based on some of the comments that I've heard, I really haven't had an opportunity yet to go through and read everything. So a lot of this is stuff that has been told to me by the council. I think there was some comments about the motivation behind the city's action is to apply the code to regular scheduled fire life safety inspections. We want to make buildings safe. Yes, we may be doing it differently than we have in the past, but that is in response to feedback from the community and you as our elected officials. And we feel that it's important that we complete thorough inspections of the buildings, and we are carrying through on that direction. We aren't in cahoots with anybody to redevelop this property. In fact, the only person the city is talking to about redevelopment on this whole block is the neighbor to the west. And the owner of that property has approached us about potentially working on a project on her property. In fact, it is our policy to only work with owners or contract purchasers. So if there was any intent to redevelop this property, the owner would know about it. I also briefly mentioned the qualifications that are required from the chief building official. I want to address that his qualifications as a chief building official, as that too has come into question. Thaddeus received his master's degree in architecture and worked in that field in the private sector for 10 years before starting his career in the public sector. Once there, he spent about 5 years working his way through that system, most recently serving prior to DeKalb as Rockford's building official. He knows the code, he knows architecture, he knows procedure, he knows how to work with owners to achieve results. And I'm guessing at this point he is developing a relationship with both of these owners because he has a really good knack of working with owners to find solutions to their unique problems. As I mentioned before, the CEO is not required to have any engineering certifications. Rather, he is charged with enforcing the provisions of the code, rendering interpretations, and adopting policies and procedures in order to clarify the applications for the code. So again, in his role and hearing comments and thinking about what we're going to do moving forward, we will take those into account and we will try to make improvements to the system. At this time, Byron, if you can cue up the video for us, I'm going to ask Thaddeus Mack to come up and show pictures of what we saw when we did the inspections on Thursday and Friday.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Joellen. So I'll just run through these. We've got them laid out roughly in an organized fashion going across the buildings, both between the Lord Stanley building, annex common grounds, and then addressing also some of the basement conditions that were found below those, resulting in the concerns we had over the structure of these properties. So here's a rough diagram. Ground floor, you can see on the right is Lord Stanley's, the world famous pizza in the top right corner, bathrooms up in the other corner. Common grounds, the annex, as well as bathrooms and several stair locations shown, as these will come in as I go through the pictures. Basement diagram, roughly the same larger layout for Lord Stanley's with a central stair going down there. Under common grounds, there is a back stair, and there were actually 2 stairs in this building previously, but both have been since abandoned or capped at the floor level. And the annex on the left-hand side has got 1 stair going down around the back bathrooms and corridor area. So here we're going to start with Lord Stanley's. The area shaded in blue will represent the unsanitary conditions that were found as a result of the inspection on Friday, April 6th. There's a mouse or rat trap that is placed in the basement near the cooler in the basement area where food is currently stored or they have beverages stored nearby. This is an area of what is presumed to be asbestos tile to be 9 by 9 square, which is generally indicative of asbestos tile, as well as the way some of the tile is cracking and breaking in this area. Is also commensurate with how I've seen other tile in town and other tile elsewhere that has come back tested positive for that, but it's something that I advise the owner, get that tested, determine what it is before taking further measures, but to offer up other options with the owner on how he could potentially remediate or encapsulate. There's another area further back in the corner of that room of asbestos tile, what is presumed to be asbestos tile in that area. And typically when you see degradation like that, it's from prolonged exposure to water, so it'll get wet and then dry out and wet and dry out. This is an area in the back to the left in that picture. You can see what is an old pizza oven, and the floor there, I believe at one point in time was covered with a tongue and groove wood placed over top of 4x4s laid perpendicular to the run of the wood in the dirt, and I'm not certain what that growth is, but felt that was an area of concern having that in close proximity to some storage areas in the basement. So we'll move on to another portion of the building identifying unsanitary conditions. This is in the back by the soda syrup dispenser. As you can see in this picture, there is some area of red. Presumably there's a bag leaking there, but there are areas of black as well, kind of by those cylinders in the top of the picture that show that this has been an ongoing issue, having that leaking across the floor there, creating a nuisance, and obviously likely the need for having the rodent traps on the other side. And this is a new open site waste, open site drain that was put in probably 2 years ago from another issue that had arisen out here, but just to show the area of proximity from the syrup bag leak over to this area, and there is a floor drain nearby there, so it is at least contained to that area, but definitely have an issue that needs to be addressed. These are pizza boxes that you can see in the back by that yellow column, as well as up on the shelf there. Again, the floor here is exposed dirt with I'm not certain what growing out of it, but something that I had concerns with as far as public safety and food preparation occurring, or people coming down here to grab boxes to make orders up to leave. There's another area, I believe that is spaghetti sauce in those boxes, but trash on the floor as well as a dirt floor down here, and no easy clean surface, sanitary surface that could be easily sanitized and cleaned for food to be stored in order for it to not have contamination or potential for attracting nuisances, rodents, that type of thing. This is a chest freezer that was observed during the inspection. On the top of that, list out some of the items, Italian beef, pickles, that type of thing. I wasn't certain if this chest freezer was in use, but was concerned with whatever black growth is on the outside of the chest freezer. And here's another picture, so it does appear that that was in use at the time of the inspection. There was ice on the inside of it, as well as some product inside, apparently to be used for different orders. This is just another picture of that. This is an area stepping back from where that chest freezer was at and turning slightly about 90 degrees. The top left there, you can see a white box. That's another freezer in the basement. But there's some trash on the floor around there, some other debris on the floor, as well as just the exposed dirt floor in this area that's intended for having food storage. This is an old, I believe it's an abandoned cooler, and that was stored in the back hallway So coming down the stairs into the basement of Lord Stanley's, make a left and make another left. There's a boiler room past this, but just unused equipment sitting throughout, not certain if it's been properly drained or dismantled. This is a better shot down that hallway back into the boiler room with a couple of penetrations going through the wall there. This is an area on the other side, so where the syrup bags identified previously, take a left and walk down about 10 feet. And this is sitting on the floor, so as you can see, the horizontal lines in this picture, where I'm presuming had some type of 4x4 or wood sub-member resting against the dirt, and then had a tongue and groove wood floor on top of that from my conversations with Mark. There was also similar construction elsewhere in the basement, not throughout, but some of that was starting to rot up. It was something identified with Mr. Thompson, something he's worked on correcting right away. This is another picture of that secondary freezer. On the back right, you can kind of see in that picture, depending on how good the screens are, you can see that other chest freezer, the black one there, with some of the trash on the floor, dirt floor underneath there. We're going to move into, this is just one picture of a bathroom and condition that was occurring in the ladies' room at Lord Stanley, so I appreciate the comment about not everybody wants to use the bathrooms there, but certainly I want to try to better this as much as possible. So this is a toilet that is not in use and cannot be used. It wouldn't flush. I also talked with the owner about this. He's aware of the issue. Mr. Thompson has every intention of replacing this toilet. It may in fact be done right now. I'm not certain. I need to stop by and visit him on my way out of town just to see what progress we've got. So here are structural concerns and conditions in the back of the common grounds. So in this picture, the horizontal kind of leaning piece in the middle there is a beam. That beam, as you can see in the top right, has got 4 joists that come and span over top of that. There is a gap in between those because those joists are not resting on that beam. At some point in time, that beam has dropped. So on the left side is held up by, I believe it's 3 2x6s getting together, is picking up support on the left. On the right, it appears to be just friction holding that beam against the wall. The right floor joist is resting on what appears to be an old pipe that's cast into the foundation. Not certain what that's for, but it's been cut off and abandoned. So my concern on the back there, now these stairs are not accessible to the general public, but is something that, as I see settlement like this occurring, gives me pause for concern to understand why that's happening and how it's gotten to this point. This is a picture on the other side of the stairs coming down in the back. As you can see so where the board meets the drywall there's a slight curvature to that, and then also where that board is resting on the wood post underneath, there's some compression that has occurred over time because the load that's not getting transferred correctly down to the foundation is all getting rested on that. I believe that's a 2x12. And it is old growth lumber, so it's a lot better than what current lumber we have now, but the bottom of that is starting to get compressed from the weight on top of it pushing down on that single point load. And the cupping of, that's what it's called when the board kind of bows out like that. When I talked to the structural engineer today, wasn't certain if that was due to weight coming down on it and pushing it out, if it's just dried over time, and that's the way that the board has formed, but something that I wanted him to look at as well. So here's another picture of the stair, that beam that I just talked about at the top of the picture now, but the further, I want to point in the back there's a silver pipe that comes down. It's about 2-inch rigid conduit for electrical service into the building, and that landing is resting on the electrical service because whatever it was anchored into previously under the foundation has since given way, and so that is now resting on the electrical service. There is a definite tilt to that, but something, again, I'd identified with the owner as well as engineer of things that we want to see corrected. Likely we'll need to rebuild the whole thing just to get it back so it's properly anchored and plumb. Move on to other areas of common grounds. So underneath, this is a single 4x4 post that comes up, and then there's a single 4x4 essentially beam, for lack of a better term, running across the top there. The rafters that run and span across the top of that beam, even though it's only supported by 1 point load, some of them are tight in touching it and some of them are not. So I'm not certain what that was to do except to take deflection out of the floor if there was a bounce to it. If an engineered solution like that were something that would warrant or need to be put in, then that would certainly require having supports at either end and having those set on proper footings or some thickened pier below, so that way weight can be equally distributed and then shimmed so that beam is in contact with those joists above. There's another area. So on the right, you can see the stairs going up. Those are the old stairs that went into the basement from common grounds that were abandoned in order to put a bathroom up above in the back. And there is a beam there, as you can see that white beam that spans underneath the floor joist. At the end of that beam on the left, there were just nails sticking out because whatever end support there was there has gone. I'm not certain where that went, but I did see a beam pocket in the bottom, or I'm sorry, a column pocket cast into the concrete where that column sat. It looked like it was a 4x6. And additionally, this beam had some points where it was shimmed, and on the back side of that, there's actually, and I'm not certain how it got designed this way, but where the rafters end about 2 feet shy of that exterior bearing wall. And there is a double 2x header essentially sitting in there. But because of the deflection that has occurred from this, the boards are just toe-nailed in, and they're starting to bend down. And so now because of that, you can see the nails pulling out. So the only thing holding that behind that beam up is the exposed nails, which are rusted through, which was something else the engineer I had identified with him today and something he shared concerns over. This is showing the pocket in the floor where that 4x6 post sat. Not certain how clear that picture is. This is another portion nearby there, I believe just slightly to the left of where that beam was at, that shows a notch out of the bottom of that floor joist. So the floor joist, typically by code, you can't have more than 1/3 taken out. And there's a limitation on the span. It's a ratio of span versus how much is notched out, as well as a ratio of depth of the floor joist to how much can be taken out. It's never at the edge, at either the top or the bottom of the joist. It's always in the middle third, because you don't want to compromise the structural integrity of those top or bottom cords. This is another picture of that white beam previously identified that was missing a post on the end, just a better up-close detailed picture of some of the shims and gaps underneath and between the floor joist and the top of that beam. These are structural supports that were put in place at some point in time. If you look at the top, the beam there, you can see it kind of has a curve to it in the first beam, goes up, and then there's another curve in the other beam. At some point in time, those were in place, likely with just a single support post at the end of those beams, but because of floor loads up above and the imposed loads coming down, started to deflect the joist and then also deflect the beam down. So some supplementary 4x4 posts were put in place, but they're not plumbed, they're not properly anchored. So there are some nails on the top and some into the bottom, but those all need to be in a straight row and have them perpendicular to where the load is at, as well as having that beam jacked back up so it is plumb and level before those remediative measures are put in place. This is a different view, but of the same thing you can see in this picture as well, those beams, how they have the curve to both the beams. Here's another picture of that. As you can see, that post on the left has got some areas where they're starting to pull away from the beam, so some of these are not doing what they're intended to and picking up loads. In other areas, it looks like they're getting more compression, probably picking up another load that's coming down on top of them, as opposed to all of them spreading that out equally. There's a front area of common grounds. So while in the front area of common grounds, the back area of it has got concrete. It looks like some piers or some bulks were put in place to house different pieces of equipment, but up towards the front of the building, there is no concrete. It is a dirt floor, and it's got several posts in there, several columns that support that front of the store, and those were being actively dug out. Not at the time during our inspection, but there was a wheelbarrow there, some shovels down there. And then an adjacent front stair that I mentioned previously that was abandoned, where that dirt is being displaced into. Now that stair is no longer in use to the basement, but it is concerning. I'm not certain why there's excavation work taking place. So this is structural conditions in the back of the annex. That is I believe 2x12 floor joist that's spanning across the back at the stairs. You can see the top is a tongue and groove floor set over top of some subfloor. They're all about equal depth. I'm sorry, but the floor joist here has been notched out, obviously well over 1/3, and not taken out of the middle. So it was cut out of the bottom, likely a head height clearance issue. But that spans approximately 6 feet and goes and dives into a pocket on a bearing wall. So something else identified with the engineer of how to get that corrected, if it's sistering or what needs to come in to get that corrected. It's a different view at the bottom of the stairs looking up at that member. You can see also in this picture, and this is something the structural engineer and contractors that were out with the owner this afternoon when they looked at this, it appears that there was about 4 inches minimum, maybe more like 6 inches of concrete sitting at the top of that stair, and we're not certain if that was poured on top of the floor system, which I'll get into in just a second, of why that's causing so much settlement out here. But in the annex area in the basement, there, again, 4x4 posts, but these are not actually anchored into the ground. Some of them are attached into the top of, what is a 4x4 beam that runs underneath the floor joist. Standing in the back of the room and looking down, you can see there is a visible sag to the floor joist because they're not intended to span and pick up an additional load of having concrete on top of them. So that is something the engineer is going to likely get core samples through just to figure out how deep the concrete is, what type of dead loads we were working with to determine deflection and what needs to take place in order to get this back and so it's shored up and properly secured. Towards the front of the annex is another area where it looks like more superimposed dead load on it is causing deflection. These posts in the back, again, they vary from they're pinned down to the ground. Some of them actually have so much load on them that they're starting to curl, and then there are others that look like they were cut short, and so they're just, you can kick the bottom and they're freestanding. They're not actually anchored into the ground. So residential common areas, we've heard tonight, propane cylinders were our chief concern in this area. You can see the picture on the right in the middle. Our propane cylinders that were on site and observed by myself and Lieutenant Lynch. On the left is an exit light that is not illuminated during the inspection. So that should be on at all times because there is other illuminated exit signs pointing to that area. But these are things that I'd also walked through with the owner and identified, and they had the propane cylinders out Friday, I think, during the inspection, and then today, as was previously mentioned with the fire extinguishers, I spoke with the owner. He's getting that taken care of right now, so at this point it's probably done. So I'd be happy to answer any questions. One follow-up to this, though. Just to point out, I did talk to Mark Thompson throughout the day today, but at 6 o'clock, just before this meeting had began, he let me know that he believed he was done. And I am beyond pleased as can be with the progress that he made over the weekend of getting this done. He really took to heart getting the building back open, which is what I want. I want him to be back in business. And so we've come to conversations he and I had on Friday night to understand how we could get some temporary measures in place to get the businesses back open, get at least his business at Lord Stanley's open. And in doing so, he's moved heaven and earth to get this done. So I'm really complimentary of his efforts to get that done. Would like to hopefully see that continue on as he goes through this process. So we have an inspection either scheduled for when I leave here tonight or first thing in the morning. And if all goes well, we'll be removing condemnation on the Lord Stanley's portion, as well as the second floor apartments were not condemned, but posting would come down on those as a result of getting a remaining item put in, which is the fire extinguisher. On the common grounds and annex side, I met with the owner, Bill Valos, as well as structural engineer and 2 contractors this afternoon at 1:30 and talked through issues out there. I believe the engineer said he's going to have a report out in the next 2 days, identifying what temporary measures to put in place. Some of those would include building, essentially putting like screw posts in underneath the floor and then having the floor jack back up right and have an LVL or an engineered beam go in place. Other options to get there is to have intermediate load-bearing walls put back in place, but all of those, I believe we're in general understanding, would get the floor jacked back in place first, put some of these temporary measures in to then pick up that load and transfer it down effectively to a bearing surface below. Any questions?
Prior to turning this over to a couple of other comments that Dean may have, would you prefer that we ask some questions now, or do you mind, Thaddeus?
I'll answer to the best of my ability.
Let me ask this right now, and then we can maybe turn it over to our attorney. At any time on Friday, did anybody from this city say to the tenants upstairs, "You're going to have to get out"?
I have heard that statement said, that someone from our department said that. I'm not certain who, if anyone did at all. If they did, that's a concern for me. I don't condone that action. I don't want to be the heavy-handed one that comes in and says you have to get out now, unless there is something that I believe is imminent life safety concern. As we'd identify, the propane cylinders were our primary concern, with some other just functional items such as a working fire extinguisher, smoke detectors. The propane cylinders were removed while the inspection was taking place. So I believe the 10 a.m. deadline was given so that if nothing were done, we would need to take action. But obviously the owner was very responsive to this, took it seriously, and even his staff that were on site addressed that as well almost immediately.
Okay. Alderman Fagan.
How did you decide to go to Lord Stanley's that day? I mean, was it picked out of, have you been going along to different locations, or How did Lord Stanley's get picked to go into that day?
Just, that was the location that the fire prevention officer had on his list of properties to go visit, so he's got a list of these that he needs to get done, something that he had been through, and he had asked me to come along to Lord Stanley's because last year he had identified that there were differences of opinion on what code was and was not with the owner. I wanted my expertise and opinion out there as well with him, so I accompanied him on Thursday to start the inspection and went back on Friday.
And the second, well, the other thing, and I think you touched on this, when's the last time we were in there?
I believe the fire prevention officer was in there September 1 in response to a complaint that he received, and that was just in the common area on the first floor. It did not deal with any of the structural issues or sanitation issues found in the basement.
Okay.
So again, I don't want to be overbearing and say anytime, someone says you've got a nail head popping out of a wall, I need to go check the whole building. So I also was not here at the time, but understood that that was the action that he was directed to take.
The other thing is, because it looks more health issues than it is anything for, except for tile, and Lord knows how many places have got that tile. But what, when you're talking about health concerns and you're talking about the growth, and we can't say what it is, but it looks like whatever. Bathrooms, yeah. What about the health department? When's the last time they were there?
Not certain. When I saw the issues in the basement, I immediately sent pictures that I had to representatives from the health department advising them if they were aware of this, have they been in there, have they have concerns about this. I hadn't heard back from them if they've been in there, if these are things that they wanted to follow up on.
Yeah, because some of this stuff doesn't look like it's just overnight.
Correct.
And, my concern is obviously on how well we take care of our people. Granted, Mr. Hallgren, says it's not the prettiest place in town, but the same thing, we just want to, this doesn't happen just overnight.
Correct.
Alderman Noriko?
It appears to be a point of contention that the residents were informed that they had to be out by 10 a.m. on Monday. And Director Charlton indicated that the city fully expected that problems would be resolved, so it wouldn't get to that point. My question is, was there any opportunity to couch the language or to present it so that the residents had that understanding also? Because I can understand if someone came home, if I had come home and seen a notice that said you have to be out by 10 a.m. on Monday and it's Friday at 5, I would begin to panic.
Yeah.
And so while the legality, I assume, was followed in terms of this is the time, was any, immediate back effort made to say, this is what we're posting, however, we are beginning to work with the owner, and therefore, we expect that things will work out by then?
So I don't know if the owners, we didn't have those conversations with the tenants directly to tell them individually, here's what's going on. And as Director Charlton had spoke to, I would like to see process improvements in everything we do, even if we get it right. I still want to look for a way that we can be better. So with that, I would like to, brainstorm as well as take comments that were made tonight on how do we get better notification both to the owners. Certainly I don't have every tenant's contact information, nor do I want it, but at least to let the owner know, here's what's going on, here's the expectation, please communicate that to the tenants, and maybe even get a response back on that. And I take your point that, condemnation notice posted on a Friday afternoon is bad optics of having that sitting on the door. However, we did have concerns. I'm glad that those concerns were taken seriously and that was remediated by the owner. In the future, could we handle that differently? I'm open to that discussion to find out a better way to serve the community, but still maintain building safety is key and integral to this in all aspects.
If it had been noted as, you must be out by this time unless the owner addresses the following issues and we are working with the owner now or something, right. Because it pretty much sounded like, this is it, a line in the sand.
Yeah.
I think some of that stuff may have been addressed. I'm going to ask Dean Frieders to chime in here. You were the point person, if you will, at least in the newspaper coverage of this city's moving forward. What do you have to add to the presentations that we've heard tonight?
To a certain extent, I want to correct that misperception. I don't in any way want to distance myself from the decision that emergency condemnation was required or appropriate based on the conditions observed, but the conduct of our inspections and determination regarding the appropriate action to take is made by our chief building official and our fire prevention officer. And I agree with their conclusion completely. Before they implemented it, they came back and spoke with the interim city manager and myself and showed the photographs that were taken. But I think, as you can see from his presentation tonight, we're fortunate to have a very detail-oriented chief building official who doesn't rush into a circumstance and jump to conclusions. Many of the conditions that are observed are more apparent on a closer observation of the photographs. When you see a beam that is waving, when you look at it up close, and you can see that the actual floor joists themselves, the old growth 2x12s that have been discussed as being so sturdy, when you see them deforming and cracking and failing, that's evidence of a significant concern with the condition of the building. As Thaddeus had indicated earlier, there were areas where those beams were failing and the floor joists were literally pulling away, that the only support for the floor was a couple inches of exposed nail hanging out in the air. I did respond, as you noted, to a media inquiry at 10 p.m. on Friday and at 8:30 on Saturday. That was a part of our effort to be transparent and get as much information to the public as possible, specifically including the notation that we didn't anticipate any tenants would be displaced, that we were working with the owners to address concerns on that. That wasn't indicated to be indicative of taking the point on this process. It was indicated to provide information to the public, to address what was a clear concern about something that many citizens in this community love, an establishment that many people have good memories about. We have a lot of properties in the city that have challenges, and many of those challenges have persisted for years. And many of those challenges have persisted because the city has not always taken an active approach to code enforcement or building inspection. With our chief building official, we're following consistent standards citywide. If we had been in the property on Thursday or Friday and had walked out of there without taking action, and a community member had come in and showed a picture of the basement and the condition that it was in and said, City Council, your staff inspected this building and did nothing about these unsafe conditions, we would be excoriated, and rightfully so. Or if we had walked out of there and not taken action, knowing that on Friday and Saturday, their busiest times of the week when they're at their highest occupancy, a floor failure had occurred or some sort of tragedy had happened in the building, we wouldn't only have a legal issue, we would have fundamentally failed in our obligation to be protecting the public. We would have failed in the goals that this program is designed to serve. Consistently enforcing basic expectations on property maintenance is something that has been controversial in the city of DeKalb. But where a city inspector identifies an issue that poses a threat to the safety of our inhabitants, we will always recommend taking the action that renders the property safe, even where that's unpopular. Having discussion with the council and the committee of the whole and getting feedback and direction from you on how you seek to pursue code enforcement and how you seek to handle issues of this nature would be incredibly invaluable. And I'm hopeful the council does follow through with that. The guidance from council, the policy you set, the feedback we receive on the different programs the city has, that is what drives these programs. And if we're not serving the city council's direction, then we need to change them in order to ensure that we do. All of that said, I also fully appreciate the comments that were received tonight regarding the impact that this had on the tenants. And while I said I would certainly be upset if we had failed to take action and if some emergency or some tragedy had transpired, I similarly completely understand and empathize with the tenants that saw a notice on the door and didn't have more information provided to them. And that's an area where our process can and should improve. And the feedback from the public on that point is very well taken, and we will implement steps to change that prospectively. We can do better to inform the tenants. We can do better to provide contact information. We attempted, all of your staff attempted to be responsive to any inquiries we received over the weekend from any source, but it's clear that we can improve upon that process even further. We take the responsibility of dealing with issues like this very seriously. We understand the implications they have on a business to take the extreme action of closing a business. something that is only undertaken in the rarest of circumstances where there's a significant public safety threat. We wanted to provide this information to the council and to the public. We'll be providing copies of the PowerPoint presentation to the media if they wish to use it, and responding to any questions or inquiries that there are, trying to be as transparent about this process as possible. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Alderman Favor.
Thank you very much for the, for going through that. I agree, we want to have safe buildings in DeKalb. Obviously, we need to do these. I was also thinking, well, maybe we should set up an appointment, but you're right. I mean, people would move things out of the way if we said, we're going to come visit on Tuesday. I think the major things you wouldn't be able to fix. I haven't seen the copy of the posting, but again, I could see where a resident where it said, contemplating condemnation on Monday at 10 a.m. If we don't have a number that they can communicate with the city on there, we should put one, perhaps the non-emergency city, contact the non-emergency line for the city, or perhaps have, someone on duty or on call at Public Works potentially in that regard, or also, posting something on there about contacting the property owner for more information. But yeah, I think, what was done was correct. I applaud both the city and the owner for taking quick action. I applaud the city for pointing it out, and the owner for taking the quick action to try and remedy the situation. But I think always a struggle, especially in this day and age, to communicate and to be able to, we need to over-communicate, and we need to be available to continue to communicate with those that are impacted.
I also, Tony, will echo that. I applaud our city manager, Dean Frieders, our fire chief. I was in contact with them the entire weekend. I wanted to apologize to him this morning, saying, sorry with all those emails, but, I don't understand structural engineering. I don't understand some of the many questions that were emailed to me, that were texted to me, that were phoned to me. And so I do appreciate the willingness on our staff to stay involved throughout the entire weekend. And I really appreciate it. Also, Joellen, of course, was very, very involved in that email chain or whatever we had going over the weekend. Alderman Jacobson.
I would echo some of those comments. I did have the opportunity to talk to Joellen and Eric yesterday and thought that in order to stem some of the flow of misinformation, whether it was provided by the city, whether it was on our flyers, whether it was the article, again, not understanding exactly where that came from, I did have a chance to get over today and look at the postings on the building. And they surprised me. Again, if I were a resident, I would certainly have been surprised to come home from work sometime Friday evening or after and see a sign slapped on my door that the building was going to be closed as early as 9 or 10 a.m. Monday. That's something we have to figure out, without a doubt. We have to make sure that we're reaching out better to those tenants. We have to make sure that they have the full breadth of information. Well, again, it is the landlord's responsibility. We do have a responsibility as well to get involved and make sure that if they're unable to get a hold of the landlord, if the landlord's unresponsive, if the landlord's uncooperative, and in this case he wasn't, but if those occasions happen in the future, we absolutely have to do better. I know there's also questions as to whether or not the notice we are posting was correct in terms of our city code. Obviously, with some of our building updates last year, there's specific wording in that code that some people have said those notices didn't seem to follow. That's something we need to look into immediately and fix if that's the case. Again, to get quality information and to be honest and open and transparent, while I appreciate we got that to residents yesterday, again, hearing some of the concerns over the weekend and realizing I've been in that situation too. I lived in a fraternity house that was once condemned because of fire life safety issues. I've been in that situation myself, and it was harrowing, especially as a young college student in DeKalb. And again, it was only because I was directly involved with the fire marshal at the time that explained to me, yes, you're condemned. Yes, on Friday, if you pass your inspection and you get all your stuff done and it's taken care of, you have nothing to worry about. Again, going through that process, I had the benefit of that. I think we need to formalize that process. I know Lynn had spoke tonight and Kay spoke tonight about formalizing a process, not just for incidents like this, but for any condemnation, for any time we would have to displace a resident, whether it's a fire code issue, whether it's a life safety issue, whether it's a disaster. We need to make sure we have those programs in place with all of that data, making sure that we have a response plan. We have somebody at City Hall, probably the fire department or police department that's open 24 hours, someone there to address those things. Proper notice and numbers on the doors. Obviously, some sort of understanding of what the tenants' rights are and who's responsible for what, and what services are available in our town. Because we have some great services, again, with Red Cross and several of our other shelters and other things. Those are all things we can compile and we can do. And Lynn has mentioned it before, and I think we dropped the ball on that. So I think this is yet another rallying cry to get that done. I don't think anyone on council disagrees with that idea or would stand in the way of that. It's something we can do now to make sure we do better next time.
Dave, we've got to do better, and I'll tell you why. One of the things that's going to come out of this council meeting, that newspaper story, this inspection, is the fact that we're going to have more inspections. And because of this, people are going to be looking at this council and looking at this city and saying, hey, have you cleaned up your act? Have you got your ducks in a row? I don't know if we're ever going to have every duck in every row that we need to. But I'll tell you this is going to help, and this is going to be a process. I'll repeat what I said at the beginning of this meeting. I will take full responsibility for making the call to do this based on the fact that this was a recommended action after I had talked with Mark Thompson, one of the owners. And Dave, too. I lived on Pleasant Street in a commercial establishment on the second floor, so I can empathize what those tenants would have done, you know, had they been even suggested that they get evicted. So, yeah, we've got to do a better job. Any other comments before I turn it over? Joellen, do you have anything else? Thaddeus, do you have anything
Yes,
else?
sir.
Any other comments regarding this? Okay.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. We're not through public participation yet.
Haven't even consent.
I think we are with public participation. Are there any other comments of items that are not listed on the agenda? We do have some public comments regarding items that are on the agenda tonight, and we'll get to those as we move along. Thank you. Thank you to the folks at home. Thanks to the audience for being so darn patient with us tonight. Okay, we move along now to the consent agenda. If you recall, we have amended our consent agenda to delete item number 4, to move it down to item number 1 under items for separate action, and we'll make sure, Bessie, that your comments regarding that items for separate action are discussed. Motion.
So moved. Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda, and let me read the consent agenda. Approval of city council minutes. A, minutes of the committee of the whole meeting of March 12, 2018. B, minutes of the regular city council meeting of March 12, 2018. Receive and file accounts payable and payroll through April 9, 2018 in the amount of $1,843,332.40. Number 3, Resolution 2018-043, authorizing the closure of a portion of Illinois Route 38 between 1st Street and 4th Street on Monday, May 28, 2018, from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for the 2018 DeKalb Chamber of Commerce Memorial Day Parade. Roll call.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Okay, as Pat Fagan, our Fourth Ward Alderman, leaves and recuses himself, we're going to take as number 1 on items for separate action, a resolution 2018-044 approving a nonprofit special event liquor license and related special event agreement for the 2018 Corn Fest. Does anybody care to speak to this item?
Mayor? Hi.
Yes, hi.
I am able to speak to this item. I know it was pulled because somebody wanted to recuse themselves. It was
Right.
on the consent agenda.
Bessie had a question regarding the two
Great.
component pieces.
Is it okay if I stay here? Just go up here.
Is that correct, Bessie? You had a...
Yes.
Yeah, okay, good. Thank you.
Please.
So this item is before you for consideration. Resolution for the two items, as Ms. Chronopoulos indicated, it is a resolution that authorizes the liquor license as well as the agreement. I don't know, other than this is a recurring agreement that comes before you every year. We did pull it, as we do many of the recurring agreements. I don't know that we've ever had any issues with this, so certainly if we are aware of things that would need to be pulled apart because there might be differences of opinion, but as far as I know, going as far back as I know, I don't know that there's ever been anything to pull it apart. So certainly we can do that if that's the council's direction moving forward in the future, but we just didn't do it at this case because we were getting the items prepared from last year's materials.
In looking at the background information, it's basically for the some of the street closures and the area down at Van Buren Plaza, is it not, for the beer garden?
Yes, so some of the information is for the actual liquor license permit, so it talks about where they can do that. If you recall, we had an item on a prior agenda that also had location information and detour routes and the things that we needed to gain approval from IDOT for. So this is some of the final pieces that we need to make sure the event can happen on time.
Okay. Any comments? Bessie, you look perplexed.
I don't know. I'd have to look at it.
Okay. If you have any further questions, I know you'll bring it back.
We'll see.
I know you'll give me a call or text me or something like that. Okay, thank you, Joellen.
Thank you.
Okay, so that needs a motion to approve that, since we pulled it off of consent and put it on item separate action.
So moved. Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Roll call.
Markwart?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
7 yes.
Thank you. Now, moving on to the next one. It's listed as number 1 under your agenda. It's actually our second item for separate action. Ordinance 2018-012, amending Chapter 51, Traffic, Schedule C, Parking Prohibited, Subsection 33, Resident Parking Only, Tow Zone, Subsection 36, No Parking at Any Time, Tow Zone, Subsection 53, no parking 2 a.m. to 6 a.m., tow zone. Subsection 54, 2-hour parking between 6 a.m. and 6 p.m., tow zone. Subsection 55, no parking 1 a.m. to 8 a.m., tow zone. And amending Chapter 51, Schedule I, snow routes. And this is the second reading. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Gene Lowry, our police chief, will speak to this item. Gene?
Mayor, really quick, Mayor, I'm sorry. Should we grab Alderman Fagan?
Oh, yes.
Possibly.
It's cool, I got
He went out for pizza.
Probably went to the washroom.
I beg your pardon?
Probably went to the other washroom.
Did Dave go looking for it?
I believe I hear them coming back.
Where are our two aldermen?
They're coming back, I hear them.
Okay. Welcome back, Pat.
Now Jacobson's.
He probably went out for a smoke.
No, he'll be back.
Unbelievable.
Without that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Gene. Dave's probably heard this before.
Thank you, Mayor, staff, and members of the community. Tonight, we're here to talk about Safe Streets Phase 2 for a second reading. I do have some comments in regard to this, but I would respectfully request, we have a lot of community members that have been here quite a while. I know there's going to be public comment in regard to this. I think it would be appropriate to allow them to go first.
Okay. Mark Sharva. Sharva.
Just a few questions I still would love to have answered about this. I would like the chief, perhaps when he presents his presentation, to explain why there was a particular area that was singled out that was removed, and I'm glad the council took in Alderman favor. I'm glad that you made an effort to remove that particular neighborhood that the residents requested from the crime zone, and I'm curious how the chief decided to include this area, which the residents clearly defined was not a crime area, and why the chief came up with this as part of the crime area. Was it bad research? Many of the members who spoke on the ordinance last time indicated that even though the officer who was present indicated that they made attempts to contact them, most of the residents were not contacted by anybody from the police department in this particular neighborhood. So perhaps the chief can address why he decided to include that area. The citizens are also still waiting for a detailed analysis on how you arrived at the sticker fees. I brought this up before, and I know you didn't want to answer the question, but how did we come up with that dollar amount? We want to know. In fact, the residents were asking the same thing, so perhaps if you won't answer it for me, you'll answer it for the residents who spoke at the meeting. You weren't here at the meeting, but you can check it out on video. I've also suggested over and over, and you still haven't responded to my suggestion, that perhaps to pay for the fees, and I'm not against this program, I want to stress that, but I'm against the fee structure of having residents paying for these stickers, these parking passes, when you could actually generate the revenue by having those who violate the law, those who are illegally parking, why not give them a ticket and have them pay for this? Why are we fining the residents who are behaving themselves and not the violators who are parking in that area? So we need to address that. Otherwise, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Jennifer Flores. Jennifer. Hi.
Jennifer Flores, thank you for the opportunity to speak. I live in one of the neighborhoods where the Safe Streets Phase 2 is being proposed. I have been working closely with David Jacobson, with Commander Lekas, and with other members of the community, and I'm very grateful. I own my first home in the city of DeKalb. I've lived here almost 20 years. My husband was born and raised here. Our daughter was nearly hit by one of the NIU students parking in front of our home. She moved our trash can up to the garage, and before she got up to the garage, the car hit the can and knocked into our neighbor's yard. I don't want to wait for fee structures. I want my child to be safe. I'm so grateful for what you've done so far, and I ask you to please continue your hard work on this initiative. Thank you.
Thank you, Jennifer. Jeff Hallgren. Part 2.
Part 2. Thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you, Council. I live in that area. I live in the northwest section of town. I live very close to Greek Row. We have already made some parking restrictions on our street. This was done 20 years ago when they put in the business building. It's been incredibly successful. I think that the programs that the chief has put into place
and that you guys are considering, I think that those are very effective procedures for making the area safer. I'm invested as a long-term part of the community, but I'm also invested as a neighbor into this area. Whatever we can do to make it safer. And a lot of people who live in different parts of the community don't realize some of the issues that are in front of us. I think that the chief and his group, all of our law enforcement, understand the issues related to this. And I think this is a very forward-looking program that they're putting into place. So I greatly encourage it, and I have been sent as an emissary by my neighbors to, I don't speak for them necessarily, but I think God bless you guys for this, for this length of time that you've been putting on the Stanley's issue. My goodness gracious. Speaking as a board member, God bless you for this. But in any event, I do want to speak to the programs that are being put in place. I think that the chief has given a great deal of consideration to it. You guys have, and I applaud you for that. As far as the fee structure is concerned, people pay fees for parking in any number of communities. I don't think that it's extraordinary. I think the fees seem fairly reasonable to me. I know that everybody's affected by dollars, but they seem fairly reasonable, very reasonable. So those are my thoughts on the subject. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. I received 3 letters, and I'm going to take the liberty of tightening some of these up a little bit, but you'll get the gist of this. Tim Struthers from DeKalb wrote in strong support of the action you're considering to tighten up parking standards as recommended by staff and the police department. Parking should be available for residents and occasional guests at a reasonable level and for a reasonable period of time. Excessive cars beyond what is reasonable is not consistent with good public health and safety practices. From Mr. and Mrs. James Krupp, I'm writing to express our support for the Safe Streets Initiative. We cannot attend Monday's meeting, but please feel free to use this letter of support. While I am sure some are complaining of the expense of the permit requirements and the inconvenience factor, this is a necessary move for our city to make, and one that similarly situated cities have already done. And for Mr. and Mrs. Charles Moore, we've already spoken at length to the police department regarding this. We're both in favor of the proposal, but naturally are concerned as to how it may impinge on our neighborhood, as overflow traffic may head for our neighborhood. We will need better signage and enhanced police patrols, and that from the Moores. Now, Kate, I know you received some correspondence from your folks. Do you want to share that before Gene makes his comments, or would you prefer that Gene make his comments first?
No, I'll preempt the chief. There was concern from a number of individuals on Thornbrook who pointed out that they have not had parking or safety crime issues on their street. Looking for some support, and I know we've gone back and forth on this, looking for support to have their street removed. I recognize, however, it's contiguous with other areas in the Elwood district and the issues that might present. Concern that there might have been some change with the proposal, although I think the chief and I have kind of straightened that out to the extent that we can't quite determine where that came from. The issue about, I did have a phone call, a fairly lengthy conversation yesterday afternoon with a resident who, was concerned about the awkwardness and the inconvenience of having to call into the police department for unexpected guests. So when the chief talks, if he can briefly mention if the administrative procedures are in place for the, temporary parking, or when there might be a time frame on that.
Thank you, Kate. We'll reserve any additional public comment before council discusses this ordinance, but Jean, the floor is yours again.
Thank you. I do have some comments. I'm not going to go in depth into the ordinance. You've already heard the ordinance on first reading. I'll be responsive to any questions you have. But I kind of want to take you back, more or less a look back, not only to council and staff, but to the community in regard to the genesis of the Safe Streets Initiative. Back in 2016, we had a significant increase in crime. That crime spike, if you will, was felt across the state, throughout many communities, and literally throughout the nation. So that starts to set the stage. But what's more important is what we began to see in 2017, especially as we began to move into the fall of 2017. And I without living graphic detail, let me remind us of a few things. The neighborhoods that we're focusing on are primarily student-related neighborhoods. Not all, but primarily. It's the most densely populated portion of our community, and it has some of the most poverty-stricken residents in our community. Crime in 2017, overall, our most serious offenses did decrease by 10%, and we're proud of that. But gun violence escalated dramatically. In the neighborhood east of Annie Glidden, which we commonly refer to as Greek Row and the streets just adjoining that typical Greek Row concept area, let me back up one. In total for 2017, we had 85 shots fired calls that the police department responded to. In the Greek Row area, after we filter out all of those that were unfounded, all of those that we found no evidence of, we determined there were 13 shootings in the Greek Row area in 2017, or evidence of some type of event that's indicative of a shooting. On the west side of Annie Glidden, another densely populated student area, after we went through the data for 2017, choosing only those incidents that we had some level of evidence indicating that it was verifiable, we had 6 additional shootings. So that kicks us to 19. When I look at Normal Road, there were 2 more. That kicks us to 21. So as I look at what brought the Safe Streets Initiative here, certainly no one from the police department wants to do anything to inconvenience or to distress neighbors in any neighborhood. But when people begin to shoot firearms in the middle of our city, a couple of those shootings were described as shootouts at the OK Corral because multiple rounds were exchanged. You may recall just recently, as of last week, we arrested 2 offenders for the October 31st Halloween shooting in the 800 block of North Annie Glidden, where multiple rounds were discharged from a handgun into a motor vehicle that was occupied, and also into adjoining apartments at the apartment complex just south of where that incident finally ended. A young 28-year-old woman was hit by that gunfire. When I look at what the council's done in regard to the neighborhood that's impacted by the Safe Streets Initiative, I look at all the things that we're doing. You know, we're looking at adding LED lights. We're looking at the CPTED, the crime prevention through environmental design. We're looking at a host of things to address that, Safe Streets being one of them. But one of the major moves this council made was to form the Annie Glidden North Task Force. There was a reason for that. It wasn't an economic reason alone. It was a concern for public safety. So as we move forward, when I look at the Safe Streets Initiative, and let me just remind everyone, I think the focus is lost because we focus on these parking regulations. It's 3 phases. The first phase has been ongoing. It's already been underway for quite some time. It's proactive policing strategies. And those don't just include the police department. That does include code. That does include crime-free for various violations that are symptomatic of environments that create crime. But we also used intelligence-driven policing to put police officers in the right places at the right time. And you'll hear more about this at the annual report, which I am going to trim down because I know I bore you to death at that. But we use that resource, that intelligence-driven policing, to get those officers in the right place at the right time, and they have made some impressive arrests and results. Those will be reflected in our calls for service increasing. A large percentage of those calls for service increase due to the proactive policing initiatives. When I look at proactive policing initiatives being one component, the second component I always look at are these parking ordinances we're all trying to work our way through. Here's what I believe at the end of the day. However this shakes out, whichever way the council decides to go, whatever changes are made, we'll all eventually adapt to that. And it will become the norm, much like it has for the University of Illinois in Champaign, much like it has for my alma mater at Western Illinois in Macomb, and the list goes on and on. But the most important thing in the 3 phases of Safe Streets is this: the safe routes. We're building in safe routes that have improved lighting, a greater level of police presence, where students and non-students alike can walk the streets, especially along these routes, and have a higher perception of safety. And where our intentions is to beat this crime down. And no matter what people think of policing, the simple fact is, I don't want thugs ruling this community anymore. So there's your 3 phases. When I look at phase 2, and I think the questions are really good, or the comments that came up tonight, I think they're very good. When I look at the goals of phase 2, and actually the entire Safe Streets, I think we answer them, but let me look specifically at phase 2. When we designed the 4 phases, we thought, let's do phase 1, a beta site, much smaller, Russell and Crane. Let's see how this fits in. I'm pleased to announce that's actually phase 1 is phased in without incident. It's up and running. I hope to have some statistically significant data at the end of a 12-month period to say, here's the results. When I look at phase 2, here's the biggest reason why we're doing it. We know that phases 3 and 4, which is Annie Glidden, west of Annie Glidden, and east of Annie Glidden, that I just described those shootings. But phase 2 is where people live adjacent to those neighborhoods, or have a separate problem, like the historic district has had on John and Harrison Street. As a matter of fact, last Thursday evening, we had a shots fired call in the 100 block of John Street. When I look at phase 2, the simplest way I can say this is, did you ever grab a balloon and squeeze it? When I look at the neighborhoods, west of Annie Glidden, Fotis, Echo Park, Sparrows, you name it, and east of Annie Glidden and Greek Row, those are our crime problems. When we get into those phases, we're squeezing the balloon. When we squeeze that balloon, the potential for displacing that problem activity into adjoining neighborhoods is high. So we opted to say, as we phase this in, we're moving into phase 2 first before 3 and 4 to protect the families, the residents who have not suffered as dramatically as those in 3 and 4, but will prepare them, so prevent them from being displaced. That's what Phase 2 is all about. When I look at the question in regard to why Lauren, Lauren's an interesting situation for a couple of reasons. Lauren's caught right in the middle of the high-traffic area between the university and especially the west side of Annie Glidden. Foot traffic and vehicular traffic, especially Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights, and especially way after hours, where we have our most serious offenses. From 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. every night, we run more police officers on our streets because that is our high demand problem time. Many of our most serious events, our most violent events, are occurring during that time. So Phase 2 was protecting folks from displacement. So at the end of the day, for all these phases, and in summary, I would say this. Do I believe that the parking component of this program does inconvenience folks? I do to some degree, yes. The choice is inconvenience versus safety. That's the choice. There is no other. There is no other. So before I open it up, I'd also like to address costs of sticker fees. I won't do it tonight, but I will come back and provide you with information about how I perceive or how we have evaluated the cost. I actually believe that we will not recover our costs on sticker fees. When you look at the cost per week, if you needed a parking permit, not all people will need one, but if you need extra ones for your residents in one of these affected neighborhoods, it's 50 cents a week. When I look at the historic district, to respond to Alderman Norenko's questions or concerns, certainly it is a district that's very mixed, and there's varying opinions, right? But it definitely has some crime problems in that neighborhood. Mm-hmm. When I compare it to Lauren, that neighborhood, you know why Lauren doesn't have a crime problem of any consequence? It's already resident-only parking. It's already resident-only parking. The only issue to look at someday will be how to permit that. I guess I'll close and let you open for your questions with this. In regard to guest parking, the ordinance has built into it through all phases the ability to use what we have traditionally called in the police department the alibi methodology, which is, I'm going to have a Christmas party at my house on Normal Road, and I need some extra parking, or you name the street in the historic district on Muir, and we need a little bit extra consideration for that. We do that all the time. We have done that traditionally for decades. But we are planning to deploy an online permitting system for temporary parking that will be convenient and facilitate people who have a need before the students return in August. If there is a delay in that, we will honor our ability to alibi park them. So I don't keep you up too late. I'm going to defer any questions about Phase 2. You've already heard the first reading.
Right.
I'll respond to any questions you have.
Second reading has been moved and seconded. Any further comments? Alderman Noriko.
I'll keep it brief. I really did struggle with the issue about Thornbrook because I've had comments both ways. But ultimately, I respect the chief's judgment. And also, I think it's important if we err on the side of caution. And I think that's what we're trying to do overall, and as well as thinking about the greater good. And I think the greater good would be served by approving.
Any other comments or up from city council? Roll call. Oh, excuse me, Tony?
I'll just add in, all of the comments that I've received this week have all been positive with the Phase 2 changes that have been amended.
Thank you. Alderman Fanouken.
Again, the comments I've received this week, too, have all been positive. Just one question, but I think Gene's already addressed it tonight, going to the online permit. A landlord who has several properties in the restricted area was concerned about him going there to check on his properties and how he was going to park. But I think you've addressed that with that online parking permit.
Alderman Marquardt.
I'm just noticing, I don't know if they turned in a speaker thing and we didn't recognize it.
I have not seen any speaker.
Yeah, she brought me one and I gave it to you.
I beg your pardon?
I gave them to you. Unless you guys didn't bring them to me, but I gave them everything that I had.
Mayor, I could certainly step away if they'd like to speak.
Come on up, Christie. No, it was somewhere lost between you and me. I did not have it.
It's probably mixed up in all those.
Yeah, that's all right. Thank you for allowing me the time to address you today. For those of you who don't know, my name is Christine Wang. I'm currently serving as the Speaker of the Student Association Senate at NIU, and I just wanted to reiterate some of the concerns that we have because we feel like they haven't been sufficiently addressed by the city. So I want to first of all make clear that I am not going to pretend to be the foremost expert on safety. No one in the student body can do that. I am a huge advocate for better safety in the community and for our police department's work. I also appreciate the hard work that the PD has done to keep our students safe, and for their work, the chief's work, and for the council's work. I am grateful, and I think I speak for the rest of the Senate and the student body when I say that. But that being said, I'd like to bring up those concerns. First, the timing of these proposals should be carefully considered. While this body and NIU are two separate entities, consideration should be given to the academic calendar of NIU. There's only 2 more council meetings left before the end of the semester, one of which falls on the week before finals. And if all 4 phases are scheduled to be implemented by fall of this year, this timeline poses a problem in which students will not be around when the last 2 most impactful phases on the student body will be passed. Second, the cost of the proposed permit is another concern. I know that's already been reiterated, but I wanted to point out that having to pay $92 for a parking pass at NIU and an additional $25 is actually a pretty heavy burden on students. It brings it to $117 for a single car. For residents who want to bring guests to their homes, that's an additional $5 per day, which can disincentivize guests who may even be potential transfer students from coming to visit. And so this cost is actually more than a mere inconvenience. It's a problem that can and will adversely affect students as well as regular residents. Third, the issue of drunk driving is another concern that's been raised. Because the future phases will be implementing parking bans in areas that are frequently visited by students and others, the concern is that people who drive to a party and get more intoxicated than intended, which happens often, will be incentivized by the ban to move their car rather than face the potential of towing and the towing fee. In theory, this means that students would simply be more responsible, and university-sanctioned parties are supposed to end at 1 a.m., which would theoretically give ample time for students to move their cars. But in practice, we all know that's not going to happen. It is unreasonable to expect all students to be responsible. All it takes is one drunk driver to ruin their life and another's. And additionally, in practice, it is unreasonable to expect that all parties are university sanctioned, or even that every university sanctioned party is cleared up by 1 or 2 a.m. Finally, the concerns regarding outreach is another issue that students wanted to have addressed. The PD has taken significant steps in improving this for phase 1 and 2, and for the overall idea of the Safe Streets Initiative. But moving forward, we would like to ensure that there is a high level of outreach and communication with students. It's important to include not only the residents and the students who live there right now in this conversation, but also the students who are currently living elsewhere, either on campus or off campus as a commuter. These students will be the residents next year, and the year after, and the year after that, and they should have a say in what happens in that neighborhood. While these concerns are the most pressing ones that we have gathered, there is, I want to say, overall support for the general spirit of the initiative. The shootings last semester have made students afraid to be around the city, which is detrimental to both the social scene of the university and for the city itself. We understand that this is a proactive measure on the police department's part. And from my understanding, students are more concerned with the implications of the initiative and will need ample time to process and understand each phase it has passed through the council. Additionally, there is an understanding that any measure put in place to address safety will include inconveniences. If these inconveniences are based on the concerns that have been brought forth, it is up to the deciding body to determine if these inconveniences are mere inconveniences or cross the line into detriment for our residents. And therefore, I ask the council consider working with NIU and NIU students to find solutions to these proposed inconveniences, which ensure the combination of safety and convenience, such as working to implement a safe bus line, such as one that Molly's or Fatty's uses. Going forward, in conclusion, I hope that these concerns will help drive the overall discussion regarding this and the other phases. I have stated before, and I will state again, that I believe strongly in the idea of university. While there's absolutely no equivocation in which option we would choose, if we were to pick between safety and convenience, it is not a black and white choice as it has been presented, and it is our duty to mitigate all concerns that students will have in the fall, which minimizes the impact of this as much as we possibly can. And so on behalf of the students of Northern Illinois University, I urge you to take these concerns seriously and to carefully consider the impact that this ordinance will have both positively and negatively on the students. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Christine. And again, I'm sorry we lost your form. So.
Without going too much in depth into it, I certainly appreciate Ms. Wang's comments. We are working with NIU. They have designated a representative to work hand in hand with us. Much of that information that we have, goes through that individual as well. Well, let me talk a little bit about the outreach. You know, when we canvass just for this event, we also canvass for Phase 1. There are 347 residences in the neighborhoods affected by Phase 2. Of those, there were residents home at 128 of them. Total support for the program was 109 out of the 128. That equates to about 85%. Those opposed, about 12. There were 12, or equates to just about 9%. Indifferent, about 7 for the total of 128. When we look at the amount surveyed, based on that survey, and it was only one time, and it was during the day, of the 347 residences, about 37% had respondents that could talk to us about the program. But let me summarize some of the other community outreach methods that have been going on since last year in regard to safe streets. We've had ward meetings in regard to it. Some of you aldermen have participated in that. That information has not only gone out to the media when they were going to be held, it went to NIU as well. We've had off-site meetings with representatives from our command staff with various groups, including on at least 3 occasions with Ms. Wang. I've made an appearance before the Student Senate last year regarding Safe Streets Initiative. We've had other meetings with NIU officials in regard to this, and the NIU administration has said that they endorse this Safe Streets Initiative. In order to further get information out, we created the Safe Streets landing page and put that information out in a press release, both to hard copy media and radio media, and to NIU. That encourages people to give all kinds of feedback. We've used social media in a variety of forms. DeKalb e-News has been used. Local media on multiple occasions has been used. I have discussed safe streets on more than one occasion on a radio show I participate with a local radio station as well. Again, our door-to-door canvas. We have also had direct emails through crime-free housing to landlords. Now, we can't control whether the landlords get the word out or not, but we ask them to. We've also done this with NIU. We've used our Alert DeKalb system to get the word out. And actually, thanks, and he's not here right now, Mr. Feldman made a suggestion, why don't we create a QR code? I felt like an idiot. Why didn't we? So we created a QR code, and we're attaching that to as much as we can that takes people right to the Safe Streets Initiative. you know what, there's not much more we can do community outreach-wise. This has been going on for months. But April 23rd at the council meeting, I've asked that the council conduct another public hearing in regard to this. We've just set up a meeting for April 26th designed just for students at the police station. We're also working on reaching out to other groups to conduct more meetings. We hope that we've created enough venues for folks to get their word out. You know, I don't want to be this guy who just up here to rebut, because it's really counterproductive to anything. When you start talking about drunk driving and because someone can't park in a certain area that's going to increase drunk driving, I think I'd like to look at it as what can we do to increase responsibility and accountability. If you're 18 years old or 17 years old or older and you're going into a neighborhood or you're a student going to the university or any college, I think there's some ability to have a little accountability and responsibility for your actions. If there's any other questions, I'd certainly address those with council.
Any other comments or questions from council? Alderman Verbeek.
Has there been a consideration to coordinate registration of NIU student vehicles that have purchased the permit? And would there be a way to take that registration and instead of charging the NIU student that's already purchased that pass, would there be a way to find a compromise to have that registration and that they, yes, could park certainly in their neighborhood, but would there be any consideration of recognizing that student parking permit to be able to park in particular areas, for example?
So just so I hear it right, if an NIU student would have a university paid for permit already, to consider the option of issuing a permit without a fee for the Safe Streets Initiative if they qualify within a respective neighborhood?
Yes.
I think that's something that could be considered.
Great.
I
Well, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've been holding my tongue all night, and I guess I'm going to continue to hold my tongue because it certainly is frustrating oftentimes, and my mouth has gotten me in trouble in the past. But I'm sorry. I'm sorry. If I used to walk to class, or, you know, you have this wonderful bus system, you know, do you have to drive from your apartment to campus to park in a parking spot on campus all the time? So I'm a little frustrated with that to a certain extent. And you know, times change as things go and people travel differently than what we used to. But so that sounds a little, I don't know.
Okay.
Spoiled, but anyways.
Roll call.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move it right along. Item number 2 on your agenda, actually third for us, ordinance 2018-017, amending Chapter 52, offenses against public peace, safety, and morals, subsection 52.130, parental responsibility. This is first reading. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. To discuss this is Gene Lowry, who will introduce his deputy.
All right, you know, I got to say a couple things about this program because I'm very proud of it. I'm going to take you back through another look back through policing strategies in this city. And I want to emphasize this because I think this is somewhat overlooked at times. Traditionally, police departments use enforcement or other traditional means to accomplish the goals they have in regard to maintaining public safety, decreasing crime, and the like. I think we've really set ourselves apart by doing things outside of our typical wheelhouse. And let me give you a few examples as I introduce Deputy Chief Petrogallo and Compass. When we started to have problems with juveniles in certain neighborhoods back in the summer of 2012 that were repeating themselves over years, the preceding years, and had culminated in 2012, we formed a citizen committee called the Youth in Need Task Force. The Youth in Need Task Force got together and in 2013 put out a program called Camp Power, a community collaboration. Totally out of our wheelhouse, probably didn't know what we were doing going into it. It really had a dramatic impact and is continuing to this day. This is a program like Compass. The Enhanced Resident Officer Program, when this city council allowed the purchase of a residence in the Pleasant Street neighborhood to have a police officer and his family move in to help address quality of life issues and crime with significantly positive results, decreases in calls for service and decreases in crime. That was thinking outside the box. That still might border a little on more traditional, but again, thinking outside the box. When we look at opioid use, heroin use, and the dramatic impact it's had on our community, I look at the Narcon program, which has been implemented by our police department, where we deploy Narcon in situations when our officers arrive on scene and they find someone unresponsive. We have a phenomenal fire department. They do a great job and save many lives. But sometimes that few extra minutes or those few extra seconds with that administration of that drug saves people. And I have been before this council over the last 3 years telling you about the lives our officers have saved deploying Narcon. Follow up on that is a program you're going to hear more and more about that you've already heard a little bit about is Project Hope, heroin, opioid outreach, prevention, and education. We just had our first test case today. Just had our first test case, and we're just in the concept stage, preliminary stages. Another great example. But let me give you the one that was a big hitter this year. Over 200 people attempted to commit suicide over the past, year and a half. Or discussed suicidal ideations, or made significant movements toward accomplishing that goal. Behavioral health issues are significant, and we're trying to find a way to be responsive to those situations where law enforcement comes in contact with folks that have behavioral health issues. The police department, in conjunction with the 708 board, the mental health board, put in a grant to the Department of Justice, the mental health grant that you approved. We hired a mental health coordinator. You're going to hear a little bit more about that tonight because I'm going to ask you to put out an RFP on it. We have a chance to get additional funding over a period of years through that mental health grant, and the goal being streamlining the resources available in the police response to get people help sooner. Maybe save a few lives, maybe get some courses corrected in those lives. That's what Compass is all about. The goal is to change the outcomes. So first, before I get Deputy Chief Petrogallo up here, I want to say thanks to his leadership and City Attorney Dean Frieders. Much appreciated on everything. There's a host of others, command staff in the department, that had things to do with it. I want to talk or thank community stakeholders like Youth Service Bureau, our state's attorney, Rick Amato, and others who have stepped up to the plate to be a part of that community collaboration. And I want to thank the council for its support. Without further ado, Deputy Chief Petrogallo.
Good evening, Mayor, Council. We recently introduced you to the Compass program, changing outcomes and making parents accountable, supported, and successful. And that last word is key to us, is successful. Anything we can do to help out the family better their child, we'll do. As explained in our last meeting, the goal of Compass is to provide opportunities and resources to support juveniles and their families with the intentions to deterring future juvenile recidivist behavior. In doing so, juveniles and their families can engage with local stakeholders and members of the police department, where services can be offered at one time and one place. We provided you with the origin of the program, the collaboration that took place during the development of it, as well as the technical aspects of the program. Additionally, several of our program partners came before you to voice their support of initiating a program such as this. Some of the stakeholders that we have partnered with, as the chief had mentioned some of them, District 428, Youth Service Bureau, DeKalb County Probation, the State's Attorney's Office, Juvenile Justice Council, the faith-based community, and NIU doctoral students who are very interested in this program. We are very excited about this collaborative program and feel that it can have a very positive impact on our community. Staff respectfully recommends the approval of the Compass ordinance, and I would be happy to answer any questions that you have.
We did have a motion and a second, did we not, Sue?
Yes.
On that, okay. Yeah, let's open it up for discussion then. Any further discussion? We heard quite a bit about it from the last presentation. Roll call.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbeck?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
John, Gene, thanks. Good luck with the program. I think it's going to work fine.
Thank you very much.
Sure. Okay, item number 3 or number 4 for us, ordinance 2018-018, authorizing a special use permit to allow the addition of a 32-space parking lot at 821 South 7th Street. This is at Founders Elementary School. This is first reading. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. To speak to this item is our principal planner, Dan Olson. Dan?
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and if I can have Byron in the control room put up a few slides there, the presentation, we'll get right to this. Special use requested by the school district. They'd like to add a parking lot on the east side of the building. Brian brings that up. It's a special use is required for a public school. They actually received a couple special uses passed in the 90s when some building additions to the building when it was Huntley Middle School. They're proposing 32 spaces on the east side. There's currently 18 parking spaces on the east side right now to the northeast of the site. They've had some program changes at the school which has increased the enrollment a little bit. They've added some additional special education classes, which has caused some additional visitors, parents, meetings. So there's an increased need for parking on the site. There's currently 85 parking spaces on the site right now between the east and west side of the building. There's approximately 90 full-time staff members at the school, along with additional part-time employees and visitors. And the school district estimates on a daily basis they're short about 20 spaces. Many of those cars are parked on the one-way access in front, which will block buses and vehicles as they're during pickup and drop-off times. They want the parking on the east side. The visitor entrance for security reasons is on the northeast side of the building. There is parking on the west side of the building. That's mostly for staff, and there's no visitor entrance on that side, so they want it on the east side for convenience for visitors so they can go through the proper security checks. The plan does require a landscape plan, a photometric plan, which were submitted. Based on the size of the parking lot, they were required 6 new trees and 22 shrubs. There's some existing small shade trees where the parking lot's going to be proposed, which they'll be removing. And there's a couple trees, larger trees removed. They will be saving one large tree also. But they're planting new shade trees and shrubbery. They're actually a little flexible where they're going to add some shrubs to the existing parking spaces on the northeast side of the site, which there's no shrubbery now, so the school district was good to work with in terms of flexibility and kind of put the landscaping required where it's most beneficial. During the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting hearing on March 21st, there was a recommendation by the commission to add some shrubbery plantings between the parking lot and the 7th Street, which they did in the revision. And at the March 21st hearing, the commission voted 4-0 to approve the recommend approval of the special use permit. 3 members were absent. They added a condition that some additional shrubbery between the parking lot and 7th Street be added.
which the school district did revise their plan. They're adding some ornamental grasses in that area and also some perennials for that. So they're going above and beyond the landscaping requirements to meet the requirements. During the hearing, we did have one resident speak, Mr. John Anderson, 844 South 7th Street, spoke in opposition to the request, noting that he'd like to see some screening between the residents and the parking lot on 7th Street, which the commission responded to with that recommendation to add some plantings there, and also to take a look at other areas on the lot for the parking, and the school district explained that the east side is needed because of the convenience, and the visitor entrance is on that side, and that's where they need the additional parking. And there's a playground to the west of the building, which they don't want to add more parking back there, conflict with the students. We also did receive one email from Rich Kakuri of 418 Culver Street indicating his support of the request, and that's in your packet. So staff would recommend approval of the ordinance as prepared. Special use it's in compliance with the UDO and will not be detrimental to the surrounding neighborhood. The applicant, the school district, has submitted a letter requesting waiver of second reading. As with Little John School last year with the mobile classroom, the school district was really good to work with. Here tonight is Tammy Carson, Director of Facility Operations, and also Jeff Lincolnheld. He's the engineer with Arc Design who designed the plan. Be happy to answer any questions.
Alderman Norrico.
I drove past the site over the weekend. It's pretty close to my house, and I was curious, unless I picked up on where the proposed parking lot was incorrectly, it looked like there was a community garden spot. Was there? No. Oh, okay. Then I can't read a map. Okay.
This is going in right to the east of the building, right between 7th Street and the building in that little area by the drive.
Oh, okay.
And
okay,
the community garden, is that further
I understand.
north of that, south of there? Okay.
Misread.
Any further discussion? Who made that motion?
Alderman Norrico?
Oh, I
Okay.
did.
There,
I got you.
Would you kindly, would you be predisposed to make that motion and also at the same time waive second reading?
Yes.
Who seconded that?
Pass first, then.
Who seconded that?
Alderman
Oh,
Marquardt.
we had to do that separate.
Would you,
That's a separate thing. isn't it?
Yeah.
would you agree to,
Wait a minute, Dean, don't we have to do that separately or not?
The council has from time to time made a single motion to receive and file and waive second reading.
Thank you.
would you agree to that, Mike?
Yes.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded that we pass this ordinance and waive second reading. Roll call.
Verbeek?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Marquardt?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Norrico?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Motion passes. Item number 4, Resolution 2000, thank you, Dan. Resolution 2018-045, authorizing the execution of a cable television franchise agreement with CMN-RUS, Inc., doing business as MetroNet. Motion.
So moved.
Second?
It's been moved and seconded, and addressing this issue is Interim City Manager Patty Hoppenstedt.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. MetroNet, as introduced at a previous committee of the whole meeting, is the largest fiber optic communication services provider in the Midwest. Headquartered in Evansville, Indiana, MetroNet currently serves over 32 communities in Indiana and Illinois. MetroNet recently began expanding into the Chicagoland area and provides or will soon provide services to Batavia, Geneva, Montgomery, Oswego, Plainfield, Romeoville, South Eldon, St. Charles, and Sycamore. Currently, their network serves over 70,000 customers throughout the Midwest. MetroNet is known for their use of a 100% fiber optic network. Fiber optic networks allow much greater bandwidth, up to 100 times faster than basic broadband. Communications
committees using MetroNet are among the first in the United States to receive the state-of-the-art technology. These connections allow up to 1 gig or more of internet speed. In addition to faster internet, the fiber optic network provides a clearer television image and clear, reliable wired phone services. So in addition to providing state-of-the-art technology, MetroNet establishes local retail stores staffed with individuals who live in the community they serve. These stores allow customers to test drive services through interactive kiosks, sign up for services, pay bills, have questions answered, and have customer service right within the community. MetroNet's goal is to establish a local retail store within 6 months of service deployment. So from retail sales associates to service technicians, MetroNet will bring new jobs opportunities to the DeKalb area. So by entering into a franchise agreement, the city agrees to allow MetroNet to construct, maintain, and operate a cable system within the city. In return, the city will receive payment from MetroNet in the form of a franchise fee, similar to the current franchise agreement that's in place with Comcast. The terms of the agreement mirror the Comcast agreement, and due to different legal aspects and keeping a firm playing field and level playing field, the city has taken great lengths to ensure that we are in compliance with franchise agreements, laws, and procedures. Again, with us tonight is Kathy from MetroNet, able to answer any questions regarding the deployment, the process, the services, or anything else that the City Council might have questions on in regards to the process.
Okay. Alderman Favor.
So I do have a question about the service. Actually, it was kind of mentioned earlier where it was going to be deployed. So in the 7th Ward, in my subdivision, the west side of the subdivision, west of Devanir Farms Parkway, is yellow. So is it because you have to bore underneath the street?
No, so it's yellow. Areas that are yellow are areas that we will build out if there's sufficient interest from potential customers, or if it's private property and we have to get rights to that. So
Okay.
Is that a private subdivision?
No, it's a developed subdivision. There are several homes in the...
That's not saying we're not going to deploy there.
Okay.
That's just, we just have to color code the map accordingly for density issues.
It's contiguous to the city. It's, there's...
And if it's highlighted, we will go there.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that the color coding has to do with the density issue, or if there's private property in a particular area.
And then have you chosen a site for your retail location?
We have not yet, but we are in the process of looking.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Fagan.
So about another two yellow areas here. One's the one off of Gurler Road. There's no connecting blue to yellow, but it's just yellow down there. What does that mean for us down there?
It still means the same thing. The color coding means exactly the same thing. Is that area private property? Do you know?
So it's a normal subdivision. The only problem is, the only thing that's linking between the city and that subdivision is a road.
Is that road private? Do you have any idea?
No,
Okay.
it's county or...
Okay, then what it is, the yellow is the same regardless of where you see yellow. It's the same analogy. That does not mean that we will not be going there. What that means is we need to get sufficient interest from potential customers, or if there's a private property area. But if it's highlighted, we, in all possible terms, will be
You
going.
just said something that's interesting. You said you have to contact the people, make sure that there's enough interest. So if there's not enough interest with the people down there, you're not going to bring it down there?
That's not saying that, but what we're saying is what we have to do is kind of look at that entire area. So what we look at is if there's private property or if there's sufficient interest in our service.
Right, the sufficient interest of your service. So you might have half the people say yes, maybe, or 25, and you might say, well, that's not enough, we're not going to be there.
We've never done that before. So what we would do is probably reach out. What we call those areas is a metro zone. And what we would do is reach out to the neighbors and say, is there enough interest, and it's usually not a high percentage of a neighborhood, so I don't know how many houses are there in that particular area.
Well, you know, like one street, there might be 6 houses because nobody's built on those empty lots.
Right,
So,
so that's
I
a
mean-
density issue, I understand that. And typically, what we will do is if the city decides to expand or a developer decides to build into those lots, we will go ahead and put that infrastructure in.
All right.
Alderman Markwart.
So the blue area, you're going to build out automatically?
Automatically. This is over a $12 million investment, yes.
Okay. And I know I read through it, but I wasn't sure. If you do damage to existing other utilities?
We're responsible for that.
Okay. Just because I know of one instance, my brother in Oswego, their subdivision had multiple cases of damage to other utilities in the area.
Right. And we took care of that. I can say that with, and quite frankly, we have such a relationship with all of our municipalities. If there was a problem in your brother's subdivision and he, let's say he contacted the assistant administrator in Oswego, she would directly call me, and we've taken care of that.
Any other comments?
Just makes me nervous.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, Alderman Vega.
It looks like, am I correct in saying, I'm looking at this, and I'm looking at Dodge Edition. Is that including Dodge Edition on Lincoln Highway? It looks like it takes a railroad track. It looks like you're not going to cross the railroad tracks over here. There's nothing on, there's a spur that goes off toward the airport, and it goes all the way south of town here. And it crosses over 23 and Taylor and goes up. And you can see where it doesn't look like the Dodge Edition is being included in that. And that there is no private or anything beyond that. It looks like, and I understand when you bore across Chicago Northwestern or whatever railroad, I mean, there is fees that you have to pay for. And it looks like you're trying to avoid that, totally avoid it, where you're gonna, when we've got a subdivision that's been around town since the town's been around, that's over on East Lincoln Highway, that you're not gonna offer service to.
How many homes are in that area?
Oh, I'd say probably, what, 50, 20, 40?
At least, yeah.
What we did when we went through these series of maps, this is our networking department, we went through the city and said these are the areas that we are going to build out. That is not saying that we will not build that area out. If there's sufficient, if there are sufficient homes there, we can get across railroad tracks. We can find a way to.
And here's my problem, sitting up here, is the people in that area feel like they're always left out.
Okay.
Okay, so it would be really,
Dodge Edition, is that what you called
yes,
it?
that
Okay.
would be very, very important.
Okay,
If you included them in.
okay, okay.
Thank you.
I will follow up on that with our team.
Answer your question, Pat?
Yep.
Okay. Isn't there some in the Dodge Edition, though, that would be west of the tracks there?
That's the whole entire, no.
It's all
No, it's
east.
all east.
It's all
east.
It's all east? Okay.
South.
So what I can do is I will take that back.
Would you please?
I sure will. I'll take that back and have them relook at that, certainly.
Any other questions or comments? Roll call.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Burbick?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you, Kathy.
Yes, and I'll find out what I can.
Yes.
Would you please?
Yeah.
Thank you.
And thank you, Patty. Okay, let's move along. Item number 5, Resolution 2018-046, awarding a bid to L&T Painting in the amount of $553,700 for painting and repair of the north water tower, with staff authority to approve change orders up to $573,079. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Our Assistant Public Works Director, Brian Faber, will speak to this item. Brian?
Thank you, Mayor. The city's north water tower is located at 900 West Dresser Road. The tower was constructed in 1984, last painted in 1996, and it's a 2 million gallon elevated storage tank. In 2017, Dixon Engineering was hired to do a maintenance inspection of the tower. A few of the recommendations that came out of that inspection was a recommendation to recoat the exterior of the tower, actually 3 application recoating of the exterior. The interior was recommended, the wet interior, which is where the water is stored, it was recommended that that would be sandblasted and also have a 3-coat repainting of the interior. A few recommendations for needed repairs to the tower, one being a replacement of the wet interior ladder. In addition to that, the overflow splash pad needed to be replaced, along with a few other needed repairs, which are outlined in your memo. The total engineering estimates for the project was $763,000. With the report completed, we performed a request for bids that was released February 15th. We had 7 responses to that request. The low bid was L&T Painting in the amount of $553,700, which was $209,000 below engineering estimates. Staff is requesting council award the bid to L&T Painting. If approved, the work is expected to begin in June, with completion by the end of September. The tank will need to be drained, taken out of service for approximately 60 days. This will require some modifications to our operational level, but will have minimal effect on the ability of our system to supply water and volume or adequate pressure to our community. The plan is to paint the tank the same color as our other 3 water towers, which is the paint color is called tank white, but it actually has a little bit of blue in it. The bowl or the underbelly of the tower would be painted the same as our south and west tower, which is black. The City of DeKalb logo would be displayed on the west side of the tower, and the east side of the tower would have the high school logo repainted back on it, the same as what is currently on the tower. That's about it. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Alderman Faber?
Have we used L&T previously? Is that a company that we're familiar with?
No, I wasn't aware of them. We did have one other company, actually a paint supplier. Sherwin-Williams was actually at the bid opening. They were very familiar with that company and said that they had done a lot of different type of work, similar scope as this project. In addition, Dixon Engineering reviewed all the bids, and L&T Painting was one of the companies that's on their
preferred bid.
Preferred, yes.
Yeah, they were familiar with them and looking at the background.
Yes, they were. Yes, they were. So I have not specifically heard of them, but apparently they are,
Alderman Fanouken?
Brian, is the school district contributing and covering the cost of the school logo?
No, the city would be picking up that cost. I was not in those negotiations. I know Anne Marie had conversations with the school district. Maybe potentially, I'm not sure if Dean or City Manager Hoppenstadt had any conversations, but my understanding is the city would be picking up those costs.
It was our understanding that including the costs as a component of this overall project was not a significant item of value with regard to repainting the tank. We are going to be returning to the council at a very shortly upcoming city council meeting with a agreement that spans basically the entire relationship between the city and the school district, that covers our school resource officers and re-ups an extended term on the SRO funding agreement with the school district, that covers our reciprocal reporting obligations with regard to sharing of information for students, that formalizes and the school district would accept the ongoing responsibility for the crossing guards, as has been previously discussed with council and as the city has discussed as the plan moving forward, but the school district hadn't yet formally acknowledged, and also discussing the water tower tank painting and the re-inclusion of that logo. The combined agreement has been reviewed by staff on both sides. It was presented to the school district for discussion and received very favorably. And I know Chief Lowry knows the schedule for approval of that. I think it's in the next week. It's going to the school board for formal approval, and it would return to the council at the first meeting available after that.
All right, well, is there a difference in the cost of the city logo versus the school district logo?
No, and I was going to mention, we did do some estimations on what the cost of that would be, and it's minimal, if not the same.
All right.
And basically, it'd be the City of DeKalb logo minus the opportunity and innovation, because the lettering would just be too small.
Sure.
So the cost of that versus what's currently up there on the high school logo is more or less a wash. So if we painted the city logo on both sides, it's essentially
a wash.
the same.
Thank you. I think that's important to point out then. Thank you.
Alderman Favor?
Is there any sort of testing that you do when we recommission after painting the interior of the tank or anything like that? Is there any, like, for leaching of the paint, or to make sure, I don't know if there's any?
Not so much for leaching of the paint. When a tower is drained and placed back in service, there is chlorination of the tower that occurs, and then bacteriological sampling is conducted before we actually put the water tower back in service. On a project like this, we'll be following up probably in 2 weeks with asking council for an engineering services agreement with Dixon Engineering to oversee this project. It's a fairly big project, and ensuring that the paint is applied properly is critical. It's critical. I mean, humidity conditions have to be proper, and the different coats that you put on, the primer and that has to be proper. And so we will be approaching council in 2 weeks with that engineering service agreement for oversight of the painting of that tower, along with the needed repairs that also have to be done.
Thank you.
Jerry, one more question, if I may. With the close proximity to the fire station, I assume that precaution will be taken for wind drift, et cetera, on the paint? I mean, will they use the big shroud?
No, this tower will not have the shroud on it. Typically, that's performed when there's a sandblasting of the exterior. The intention on this tower is to power wash the exterior, and then it'll just be overcoated, most likely rolled on, as opposed to sprayed on. But there will be precautions to ensure that, there's not paint overspray, but I can just say we're hoping that that's not the case. But it will not have the canvas over top.
Yeah, just having lived through the water tower, or the West Water Tower, close to transportation, lived through that repainting. I just was curious, because we had to move a number of vehicles away from it, and I'd hate to see Eric's having speckled fire trucks.
It's the new city look.
Roll call.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Farquhar?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbic?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you, Brian. Resolution, number 6, Resolution 2018-047, authorizing an engineering services agreement with Baxter and Woodman, Inc. for design and construction engineering of 1,100 feet of water main in an amount not to exceed $71,050. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded, and again, Brian Favor is going to address this issue.
Thank you again, Mayor. The existing water main on Oak Drive is a 6-inch cast iron main that was installed in 1955. The main has had numerous breaks over the years, causing water service disruptions to the residents in the area. Staff recommends replacing the water main with a new 8-inch ductile iron water main to ensure a safe and reliable water supply with adequate fire flow is available. The replacement of the water main supports a 2015 council initiative of having an annual water main replacement program to improve an aging water distribution system. Since approving this initiative, over $2.8 million of new water system capital improvements have occurred with the addition of over 8,100 feet of new water main. Approval of an engineering agreement with Baxter and Woodman will allow the survey and design work to begin now in preparation for a bid release in July. If the bid is approved, work is expected to begin in September with project completion by October. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have concerning this project.
Okay, any questions on this water main project? Roll call.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Good, Brian, I see you got more FaceTime tonight.
You got me for a while.
Item number 7, or number 8, depending on how you're looking at it, Resolution 2018-048, authorizing an engineering services agreement with Baxter and Woodman, Inc. for design and construction engineering of 3,900 feet of roadway resurfacing and sidewalk improvements in an amount not to exceed $65,200. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded, and again, Brian?
Thank you. Approval of this resolution would allow the design work to begin on several planned roadway improvements, including pavement resurfacing on Harvey, Tyler, and Charter Streets between 4th Street and 7th Street. In addition, there would be ADA compliant sidewalk ramp improvements along 6th Street between Culver and Charter Street. These streets were chosen based on multiple factors, including surface and subsurface pavement conditions, along with their location within the approved CDBG funding area. Due to the CDBG bidding requirements, these projects were not included in the 2018 street maintenance program, and instead were pulled out as standalone projects. Approval of this engineering agreement with Baxter and Woodman will allow the survey and design work to begin now in preparation for bid release this summer. If the bid is approved by council, work is expected to be completed in late summer or fall of 2018. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions concerning this capital improvement.
Any questions or comments? Roll call.
Markwart,
Yes.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Motion passes. Thank you, Brian. Resolution number 8, Resolution 2018-049, authorizing the purchase and equipping of 2 police vehicles based on the state bid contract pricing in an amount not to exceed $110,000. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Gene Lowry will speak to this item. Chief?
Council, this has come to you in the form of the budget for FY18 and was approved in the budget. We're coming to you tonight to ask you for approving this process to move forward to get 2 new vehicles. They're going to be designed to replace 2 vehicles that are very, very old and no longer cost-effective or safe to operate. The funds being used to purchase these vehicles are coming out of our restricted fund account. Those are, again, just as a reminder, those are funds that are the result of some finding or adjudication of guilt in regard to some crime. So with that, I think everything is presented in the memo itself. If you have any questions, I would respond to that.
Any questions of the chief on this, the purchase of these 2 squads? Roll call.
Fagan,
Yes.
Noriko,
Yes.
Verbic,
Yes.
Favor,
Yes.
Jacobson,
Yes.
Fanouken,
Yes.
Markwart,
Yes.
Smith,
Yes.
8 yes.
Thank you, Gene.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 9, Resolution 2018-050, authorizing the appointment of an interim city manager. Motion.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Speaking to this item is City Attorney Dean Frieders.
At the direction of the mayor, this item proposes the appointment of Patty Happenstead as the city's interim city manager for the period of time from now until the appointment of a permanent city manager for the city. Under city code, the assistant city manager serves in the absence of the city manager, but to avoid any confusion or concern over the authorization of the interim city manager to take actions on behalf of the city, this is contemplated as an appointment to ensure that the city has full transparency on that point and that any actions undertaken by the interim city manager are fully authorized pursuant to city code. The action would, again, take effect from now until such point in time at which the city appoints a permanent replacement for that position and contemplates a 5% acting pay increase. The city has historically implemented acting pay classifications typically of 10%. For the previous interim city manager, there was a 23% acting pay classification. So this is a significant reduction from both of those. I'm happy to answer any questions the council may have.
Alderman Jacobson.
Again, I think it's important to note that just because it's past practice doesn't mean we're required or otherwise obligated to do so. I know that I did get an email this morning from someone that's in our audience rather upset about that potential pay raise, and to understand that, again, we're taking an employee that effectively came out of a 9-to-5 for all intents and purposes and putting them into a 24-hour-a-day. I reach out to some staff at 2 or 3 in the morning. Some of them are more responsive than others. To understand that they're in that role, and when Gene is taking phone calls and there's emergencies going on, that person has to be looped in to get us the information. Again, you're taking a 9-to-5 employee, throwing them in a role where they're now a 24-hour-a-day potential employee if need be, and not giving them an assistant to back them up. Again, I think in this case, a short-term pay raise would make sense. So until we decide what our plan would be and where we're going to go going forward with the position.
Thank you, David. Any other comments? Roll call.
Noriko?
Yes.
Verbeck?
Yes.
Favor?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Fanouken?
Yes.
Markwart?
Yes.
Fagan?
Yes.
Smith?
Yes.
8 yes.
Okay. Welcome officially, Patty, as our interim city manager.
Thank you.
You want to make any comments?
I appreciate the opportunity and the consideration, and we have a lot of work to do. And I am definitely committed and have the passion to rise to the occasion, and have taken a lot of good notes this meeting, and look forward to bringing forward to council some much-needed change and recommendations. And I know that I have the support of the leadership team and amongst the city department heads, and we will definitely march forward business as usual and ensure that we're meeting and exceeding council's expectations.
Thank you. Okay, item H tonight, new or unfinished business. We have consideration of a bike sharing program. No action will be taken on this. So we're going to ask Patrick Deanna, our management analyst, to tell us about this.
Good evening, council. Good evening, mayor. Tonight we're going to talk about bike sharing in particular, NIU's plan to launch a campus bike sharing program and how we as a city can support the program now and in the future. We believe lending our support to NIU's program will benefit the city by providing students with a cost-effective transportation option to the downtown area and all other cities all other areas in the city. And furthermore, this will help support the city's efforts to become a bicycle-friendly community. Our goal this evening is to introduce VioRide and to facilitate a discussion with council on on what the city can expect and how council would like to move forward with this. With that being said, I will now introduce Candace Z, Philip Halstead, and Edwin Tan of VO-Ride, and they will give you guys a brief presentation and address any questions you guys may have.
I wondered what that guy was standing back there with that bicycle. Okay, all right. Hello.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is Phil Halstead, and what I'd like to do is just briefly give you about just a 3 or 4 minute overview of what this technology is, and then we can answer any questions you may have or from the community. Basically, VO-Ride is a sustainable and as well as adaptable technology. And what we're striving to do here is really bring a one-stop solution to a bike share. There are 3 things that we have in it. It's simplicity, okay, so we design that in so it's very simple to operate as well as to maintain. It is highly rideable, okay, so we want a bike share program that is lightweight and is comfort, so people are encouraged to use it. And then finally, in terms of connectivity, the technology of this allows it to be tracked wherever it goes, and so we'll show you some examples how we can integrate the location, the data, and the ridership within where are those people using those bikes and riding those bikes to help with some infrastructure plan. When I talk about fast and easy, it's really just a 3-step process. What it involves basically is downloading a free app, which you can do if you'd like to. It's called VO-Ride. You set up your own personal account. At that point, basically you locate the bike on a map, and this one is showing up right now, except it's not showing because it's unlocked, okay? So when they're locked, they're available for rent. Someone would go on up, they would press the button, they would unlock it, and now it's yours. You can ride it wherever you want, and we'll talk about that in a bit. And then at the end of the ride, simply you come through here, and the bike is locked here at the bottom. What that does then is locks the rear wheel. You don't attach it to anything per se. One of the key questions is, okay, well, how will this be implemented? What we would do is, our plan is to develop a general manager. They'd be responsible here, dedicated to the community and to the campus, and they'd be working both from the standpoint of the operations, which I'll talk in a second, as well as to just education and helping market the program to the community, working with the community and the campus. An example in terms of the data we talked about earlier is what you see kind of in the bottom right location is the heat map, which generates the most interest. Yes, we can show the number of rides and number of calories burned in the community, et cetera. But the really most important thing is where are the routes and where are people taking the bikes from and where are they going to, and then how can we integrate that to help mobilize the community. This is the pricing that we are proposing. Again, you see a student rate as well as a resident rate, and really what it's trying to do is decrease the hurdle of just getting moving and getting riding again. So it's 50 cents for 15 minutes, or you can also have unlimited rides on a monthly, a yearly, or even a one-day rate. So we've gone through a long process with the campus. VO-Ride was selected for a number of reasons. One of them is there is no cost to the city or to the campus. We provide the capital to install the bike base. You see there in terms of being customized, we're suggesting the red bike, correct? And then we can basically do a little bit of element in terms of helping with some branding in terms of advertising, which we would manage, but it's really a fee-based model. And then finally, what you see some other elements is one in terms, again, the data and the adaptability of our system that we have. So with that, any questions that you would have?
Alderman Noriko.
Even though I haven't always done it when I ride a bike, but at my advanced age I should, helmets.
Yes.
Would you provide education about helmets or tell people where they could get them or?
It's a very common question. The first answer is yes. So we do want to put together safety education to people, and part of that will be stressing the importance of wearing a helmet. That said, because of concerns of lice and transfer, we don't want to share helmets. Okay, so we would help them, provide, hey, here's places you can get the helmets, and we want to really encourage people to wear them.
Okay, thank you.
Alderman Fagan.
Excuse me. Could you go back, I'm trying to find your fees.
There.
This one?
No.
Go forward.
One too far. No, now you've gone,
See?
one more. There you go.
There you
Fees,
go.
I'm sorry.
All right, so I bought this for a year for $99.99. How much of the time can I ride that bike? Is there a limit on that? I mean, can I park it in front of my house and driveway and I got a bike for $100 a year? Or how does that work?
Okay, so what it is it's a geofenced area, so there's a certain area in which you can ride the bike and park the bike, okay? You can ride over to your house if you want to, but you need to bring it back to park it, okay? So that's number one, to answer the question. For $99, it would be unlimited rides. What we would ask is every 2 hours you need to kind of relock the bike and reset it, because we don't want you hiding it into your garage. Now, that said, if you do that, we know where the bike is and we'll come find it.
Right.
Okay?
But after 2 hours, I mean, the bike just doesn't lock up.
No, it doesn't lock up. When you stop it, okay, it will beep, and then it'll ask you to lock it and then unlock it. What we're trying to do is keep the bikes in circulation.
Right.
It's a whole different model. Instead of like saying, this is my bike, this is a community bike, and then I'm going to use it for what I need.
Right. I just wanted to know, the 2 hour limit, that's what I understand.
That's what it's for.
Okay.
You'd look real good on that bike too, Pat. Give us an idea of other comparably sized communities to DeKalb where you're presently doing business?
Yeah, when we're in a campus situation, generally industry would say about 100 students would be one bike.
Okay.
So, but from a community standpoint, it'd be a little bit less than that. But what we'd like to do from an adaptability standpoint is put enough bikes into the area so that people can see them, get used to riding them, and then we'll increase it slowly, okay? Instead of just putting a whole bunch of bikes in.
I guess what I was saying is, what other communities is VO Ride presently doing business?
Well, as an example, we started at West Lafayette, Indiana.
Okay.
That town
Purdue.
there is about 40,000 students
Right.
and about 50,000 people.
Yeah, 50,000 people.
Yeah. And we have 180 bikes deployed there with another service provider, but that community easily is going to use 300 to 400 bikes.
Okay, thank you. Alderman Jacobson.
Provided someone took the bike outside the geofence, what happens?
What happens is if you are a fee-based, like by the hour, when you take it out, it just keeps charging you, okay? So then when you come back in and park it, then it stops the clock. So there's an incentive to bring it back.
And what if the bike is damaged or stolen or?
We have that
otherwise
risk, so that
disappeared?
risk is ours, okay? If it's damaged, two things happen. Number one, if someone sees it damaged, you can communicate through the app to us and say, hey, here's a damaged bike. We have a response time of 2 hours. There's also a 1-800 number that's operated 24/7. During the week, again, there's a 2-hour time response in terms of that. During the weekends, on an emergency, we would respond.
What happens if somebody locks the bike to like a bike rack or something and abandons it?
Okay, so you can't lock it with our lock to anything, right? If somebody else did that, what happens is we also monitor the bikes for movement. So if they're not moving, that's a challenge for us and for the community, because this is a community asset. We want people using the bike. So we would recognize that, and then we would send someone out to check on the bike.
Understanding that, knowing that there's probably 250 to 300 abandoned bikes left on campus a year, I know they have a process. Once it's locked to a bike rack, that has to be posted for 30 days, and I mean, it's a long process to remove that lock, and then there's questions of ownership in some cases. I realize yours would be pretty easy to identify.
Exactly,
but,
exactly.
I mean, have you worked with the university directly to have that understanding that you can come and cut those locks off at any point if you need to?
First answer is yes, we would allow that, okay? And each bike has a unique identifier on it, so the community and the city would have that information. I don't think we've worked through the specifics of that yet, but obviously, we would encourage that in terms of, again, the most responsible way to keep the bikes moving in the community. Anything you want to add to it?
As for the collaboration between us and the university, we have been working with the Park and Transit Department in NIU since last December. So, yeah.
Okay. Any other comments or questions? Yeah.
Was there a time frame during the day, or can it be night riding, or?
The bike has a light on the front and the back, and that's always on. Okay, so you can have them on 24/7, and absolutely someone who wants to use the bike can. The other feature we have, again, with the technology is if there would be an event, let's say like there's an ice storm across the region, and again, the police chief said we don't want to have anyone riding bikes, then we can basically lock the entire bike system down and communicate to people, say no riding until we get reasonable. That's, again, great advantage of the system.
Alderman Norrico.
Mr. Mayor, I think we should have a group ride, a council group ride.
Open Meetings Act violation, sorry, I'm out.
I think it would be spectacular to advertise it, all of us lined up with our black helmets and
I guess it just depends on how far away we'd be apart, Dave. Whether or not we would be violating the law.
I will add that May is National Bike Month, so that would be a good time to do it.
Okay, Patrick, I needed you back up there, or Tim. What do we do now? You wanted just some consensus from us tonight that we'd like to move forward with this program? Is that?
Yes, and I would also like to add, Mayor, that the rollout, which is going to be at NIU on April 23rd, is going to be for about 80 bikes. NIU has released up to 140 bikes. So this is going to be kind of a pilot test, if you will, for a 90-day period to understand the ridership and get the community comfortable with this concept. We will be doing some outreach to merchants, to the Chamber of Commerce and others in terms of being able to adapt this technology for our community. And then after 90 days, we would hope to have a full rollout, which would involve the community. And that would just about correspond to the opening of the Kishwaukee-Kiwanis bike path. So we think that might be a good opportunity to do another release for the community in association with opening that bike path.
Okay. Does there seem to be consensus that this is a good deal for the city or potential? Okay, very good, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks a lot, appreciate it yourself. You gonna take the bike with you? Huh?
I want to
Okay.
ride the bike home.
Number two.
your card, you got about 2 hours.
Number two, new or unfinished business. Request for proposal for the development of a strategic plan for the Police Mental Health Collaboration Grant. Once again, our Police Chief, Gene Lowry.
Good evening again, Council. Most of the information is available to you in the memo that went attached to the packet. But basically, this is part of the $75,000 Department of Justice grant, the mental health grant. We've already hired a part-time mental health coordinator who's on staff, who actually had a big part in putting this proposal together. The proposal is for a research partner to do some research and analytics in the development of a systematic response, what I would call an integrated systematic response of service providers and the police to provide the best services to those who are in need regarding behavioral health issues. There are no funds from the city attached to this. This is totally funded through that grant. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you have.
I may know this, but I may have forgotten. Who is our grant coordinator?
Steve Baker. He has a long history in the mental health arena as an administrator and programming person. He came highly recommended from Dr. Joe King at NIU.
Okay.
And he has really proven to be an excellent resource. So we're extremely fortunate we have him.
Wonderful. Yeah. Great. Alderman Fagan, did you have a question?
I'm good, Gene.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay,
No closed session?
what do we need to do here, Gene? What are you asking for us to do at
I
this?
believe this is a resolution to release, or just approval to release the RFP?
We typically bring RFPs to council and display them and receive any questions you have, and if there are none, we proceed forward with issuance. Any action item would come back for approval of separate.
Okay, so you'll come back again where we can vote on it?
It would come back once we have the responses, so the council
Oh, I
can
see.
select a
Okay.
successful
Very good.
respondent.
So Mayor, at this point, we're just seeking consensus that we can proceed with the request for
Right.
proposal to bring
Does there
back
seem
to
to be
council.
consensus that we should proceed?
Yes.
Council? Yes, okay. Thanks, Gene. Thank you. Appreciate it. We're almost finished, and it's not 10 o'clock yet. Okay.
Just barely.
Reports, communications. Asking each of the council members if they'd like to make a comment or two, and we'll start with our first ward Alderman, Dave Jacobson.
It's been several weeks since I've made a comment, so I'm going to jump in today for a minute. Last couple days, I've spent quite a bit of time doing a deep dive into the ocean of our local blog space and Chronicle space and LBK space. And while I've always felt like I've had a toe in that pool this week, I dove in head first, apparently. Spending, again, like 18 to 20 hours this week trying to understand what's going on out there, realizing that many of the council members don't have that ability or technical knowledge or understanding how to do it. I found some interesting things in my observation that I wanted to bring back to the council and share, and probably to staff. The most prevailing thought I think I got of the entire experience was there is a major fundamental lack of trust by a large swath, if not a very large swath of this community. And it extends to staff, it extends to us, it extends to the mayor. Our credibility rating in their eyes is 0, if that high, in some of them. And I think that's something, well, often believed to be in small sectors, to see the amount of people, the sheer volume of people, the sheer volume of comments attacking, whether it be us as council members, whether it be staff, whether it be developers in town. It all was very focused in the reality that there was no trust between these people and the community. My second observation, there is certainly something behind that lack of trust. Obviously, for many people, again, we're as crazy as 30 years ago, they were in our downtown and had a rough experience, so they haven't shopped here for 30 years. That happened. I mean, to hear some of these stories, to hear at the same time some of the business owners stepping up, saying, hey, especially downtown, we need more information, we need more city support, we need more from the city because the city does nothing for us. And again, for me to counter that and saying, here's the expenditures we make, here's the services you get for free, here's the advertising you get, here's the chamber position, and all these things, the overwhelming reality was people didn't know those things. Our business owners, blocks from us, our residents in town, they don't have an understanding of what we do here. And it was that lack of understanding and ignorance that has driven many people, coupled in some cases with some bad experiences, to distrust us. So I think it's incumbent upon us going forward, believing in the new day mentality that the mayor is providing, believing that this council is probably the most transparent and honest one I've worked with thus far, for us to step up and at some point have the discussion, whether it's us as council or directing staff, to get information out to these people. Clearly, they're not watching our meetings. Clearly, they don't read the papers. They are focused in a much more digitally sensitive world and are probably going to need direct outreach. But to give some understanding to the people that work and live here, and to give them more information and to arm them with the information they need to know rather than allow them to succumb to conspiracy theory and crazy, outrageous, sometimes, I mean, disgusting rumors that are certainly not going on this mayor's watch, on this council's watch, and even on this staff's watch. We need to make inroads to reach out to those people and include them and get them back involved and to educate them so that we can have a chance of everybody moving together forward and fixing the problems we have and having a future here. Thank you.
Before we turn it over to you, Bill, I want to respond to something that Dave said. One of those 30-somethings reached out to me a week ago. So this was long before the discussion we had tonight and the thousands of Facebook comments that I understand were made in this community over the last 30 days, or the last weekend. But she said to me, she said, you know, my group, the millennials, are sick and tired of some of the contentiousness. So she was perhaps not one of those that was making those ridiculous comments. But she did say to me, you know what you need to do? And she was looking at me as an older guy, I think.
We all do.
Yeah, really. Why would somebody do that, right?
Elder statesman.
I think you have to go, maybe you have to go to where the millennials are. Instead of expecting the millennials to come to us, we have to go to them. And that's part of that outreach effort, Dave, that you may have alluded to there. So I fully understand, and I appreciate your comments. Bill?
I was just going to add that it isn't just this last weekend, but the amount of misinformation that floats out there in the blogs and on the Facebook pages, and there are just several commenters out there that no matter what we do, believe that we're doing it wrong, or it was wrong for us to do. And, you know, this morning I know that Scott and his partner had a great conversation on the radio about some of those things and just how it denigrates down into, you know, A versus B, and there's no winner, and it just goes down in these dirty name-calling fights. And that's pretty unfortunate that we can't control that any better. So that's my comment for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Marquardt.
No comment.
Alderman Fagan.
No report.
Alderman Norrico.
I went to a wonderful community event this weekend, the Kiwanis Talent Show.
Mm-hmm.
It was great, and I think we should get Ruth Scott up here to entertain us sometime. She was with her band. She was amazing, astounding, just superb. I can't give her enough superlatives. I jokingly said to her, girl, you should quit your day job. And yeah, it was just a fun event.
When we heard the expression, or when we use the expression that Ruth Scott rocks, she really does.
Oh, my God, yeah, it was.
So, yeah, thank you, Kate. Alderman Verbeek.
No report.
Alderman Favors.
No report.
The mayor has no report. I think I've spoken enough tonight. Our city clerk, Sue Herman.
Thanks, Mayor. Two things. One thing, I will take Alderman Jacobson's spot in the bike ride. Just throwing that out there, in the group bike ride.
All yours.
And the second thing that I wanted to say is that if you guys are looking for assistance in reaching out to millennials, I may be able to help you.
Great. Thank you, Sue.
You're welcome.
City Attorney Frieders.
No report.
Interim City Manager, Patty Hoppenstedt.
No report, thank you.
Jean?
No report, thank you.
Molly Talkington, we haven't heard from you tonight.
You'll get to hear from me next week, so
Thank you, I'm
no
sure
report
we will.
tonight.
Eric Hicks?
No report, thank you.
Okay, Joe Allen?
No report.
Tim Holdeman?
A couple things. One, over the next 2 billing cycles in May and June, customers will receive a notice that our Consumer Confidence Report, or otherwise known as a Water Quality Report, will be available for viewing on the city's website. This is a report that talks about our drinking water and how it ranks with the state and federal health standards. We did very well again this year, and so would encourage our customers to take a look at that report. And then also mentioned it a little bit in the bike share item. Our Kishwaukee-Kiwanis multi-use bike path will be opening hopefully in mid-June. The contractor is trying to do a little better than that, but with Memorial Day and the asphalt plants opening up late this year, I'm going to predict around June 15th. So as a community, we'll be looking forward to that and connecting those two existing bike paths into one longer bike path. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Chris?
No report.
And finally, Mark Thorson, our IT director.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't know if I mentioned this at the previous meeting, but our live stream is back up and running with YouTube. So for those that look at the website or go to the YouTube subscription channel, you will see the meetings are back up and running. Other than that, thank you.
Okay. We thank everybody for hanging in there with us tonight. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.